Chapter 243. Like landslides and tsunamis, the Daqin prisoners crazily attacked the formation of Xiang Chu's mighty army. Each group of Xiang Chu soldiers scattered in the surroundings had at most several hundred soldiers, and at least several dozens of them. There was no way they could put up an effective resistance. As they specialized in body tempering, when facing the attacks from Jindan human immortals and nascent Soul Earth immortals, they did not have any good defensive methods. In just less than 10 minutes, 3,000 to 4,000 Xiang Chu soldiers who were surrounded outside the Clay City had been killed by the frenzied Daqin prisoners. Each of them had killed at least 30 times the number of enemies. However, the more enemies they killed, the more poisonous liquid would splatter in the air, and the heavier the burden would be on their comrades, which in turn would increase the speed of their destruction. After the first batch of Xiang Chu soldiers was killed, more and more of them could not withstand the onslaught of the crowd, and were trampled to the ground, or chopped into meat paste. Amidst the chaos, Xiang Zhuang suddenly cried out with a stern voice, "I, Xiang Chu, am the only one who can travel unhindered and look down upon the world. I, Xiang Chu, am the only one who can win every battle." Tens of thousands of Xiang Chu soldiers cried out together, "I, Xiang Chu, am the only one who can travel unhindered and look down upon the world. I, Xiang Chu, am the only one who can win every battle." A several hundred feet tall blood-red light burst out from Xiang Zhuang's body, fluttering in the sky like a war banner. He raised his sword up high and cried out, "Men of Xiang Chu, follow me and kill the enemies. Don't be fooled by their numbers. They are just a bunch of chickens and dogs. We can wipe them out with one strike." Then he swung his sword casually, unleashing a sword beam that shot across a distance of nearly 1 mile. Along the way, several hundred Daqin prisoners were cut into two halves by Xiang Zhuang. But the bodies of several hundred prisoners exploded at the same time, sending countless poisonous liquids splashing all over the sky. Another several dozens of Xiang Chu soldiers were hit by too much poisonous liquid, causing their defensive blood-red light to dim and their bodies to be corroded by the poisonous liquid. But this sword strike had driven all the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan into a frenzy. Xiang Zhuang was the strongest warrior of Xiang Chu, and he was also a man with the strength to lift mountains and carry cauldrons. When Xiang Yu was not in the camp, Xiang Zhuang was the only person that all the Xiang Chu soldiers could submit to. All the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan gave a loud cry at the same time, raising their weapons high up and gathering around Xiang Zhuang. Even those mighty soldiers of Xiang clan who were hiding in the Clay City had rushed out from the city, forming into a formation and slaughtering the endless Daqin prisoners as they approached Xiang village. Xiang Zhuang threw his head back and laughed complacently. He mounted on a single-horned rhinoceros, spurring the 6-feet-tall rhinoceros to run at the fastest speed. This rhinoceros ran with all its might. Tens of thousands of single-horned rhinoceroses in the surrounding rivers raised their heads and roared at the same time. A large cloud of smoke spurted out from under their feet, and they all soared into the sky. They were running as fast as a gust of wind while they were a foot above the ground. Tens of thousands of sturdy rhinoceroses galloped madly on the flat dam, crushing everything in their path into minced meat. Even the nascent soul cultivators among the prisoners of Daqin didn't dare to face the head-on attack of tens of thousands of rhinoceros monsters who had formed their demon cores. It was a destructive force that could destroy any military formation. Xiang Zhuang rode on the back of one of the rhinoceroses, leading the group of tens of thousands of rhinoceroses as they galloped forward. Tens of thousands of prisoners of Daqin were stabbed to death by these rhinoceroses and trampled into a thick layer of minced meat. More and more mighty soldiers of Xiang clan joined together with the troop of rhinoceroses. These warriors leaped onto the backs of the rhinoceroses, laughing and yelling as they rode forward. On the top of the Clay City, Qi Bin and Lu Mei were holding the commander's talisman in their hands and shouting out loud, forbidding their soldiers from leaving the city without permission. But how could those mighty soldiers of Xiang clan listen to their orders? Some of the captains saw the commander's talisman in Qi Bin and Lu Mei's hands, but they acted as if they did not see it. While shouting and yelling, they brought their soldiers and charged out of the city at the fastest speed. Yu Ji laughed mockingly and said, "Still the same. Wherever the king is, the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are invincible. Wherever the king is not, the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are invincible." No matter who is leading the army, without the king, the soldiers of Xiang clan will definitely be defeated. Yutan spread her arms, breathed out a deep sigh and said, "So this is the army of Xiang clan? At that time, I was already dead, so I did not know about the mighty reputation of Xiang clan. Now it seems that it is indeed the case. With Xiang Yu, the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are more than enough to sweep across the world. Without him, the mighty soldiers of Xiang clan are just a bunch of..." She twitched her lips and said in a long voice, "However, I'm no longer the Empress Dowager of Great Chu. Even if the army is defeated, Daqin will not be able to defeat them in a short period of time." Meanwhile, Qi Bin and Lu Mei, the two beautiful ladies, were trembling with anger. They were not as open-minded as Yu Ji and Yu Tan. Tears were almost streaming down their faces as they said, "How could they do this? How could they do this? This is the commander's talisman personally issued by His Majesty. How could they do this? Turning a blind eye to the military order, and turning a deaf ear to it, this is not. Yu Tan sighed lightly, shook her head and said, "They are not rebelling. They are just not willing to listen to the orders given by us, a group of women. They are just a group of hot-blooded young men with great ambitions, who want to sweep across the world and sweep across the world. How can we, women and children, be qualified to command these fierce warriors?" Qi Bin said furiously, "But Daqin has deployed so many condemned prisoners to attack us fiercely. Obviously, there is a trick behind this. If they keep doing this, they will die." A deep, powerful, and magnetic voice rang out slowly from behind the ladies. "If they want to die, then so be it. If they are dead, they can be used to craft divine immortal weapons. Divine immortal weapons will never violate the military order. It is they who are courting death, and it has nothing to do with the two imperial concubines." A gentle breeze rustled, as an old man suddenly appeared behind the ladies. He stood over 9 feet tall, and had a fat body. His face was round like a silver basin, and he had a 3 feet long silver beard. He carried himself with an air of elegance and nobility. A few hundred soldiers clad in black armors, their faces covered by pitch-black ghost masks, were following behind the old man soundlessly. Like a group of ghosts in the dark night, they too appeared out of nowhere. Qi Bin and Lu Mei gave the old man a surprised look, then bowed and said, "Qi Bin and Lu Mei offer greetings, King of Chunshin." Yu Ji arched her brows and gave the fat old man a provocative look. Yu Tan, on the other hand, had a charming smile on her face. Like a raging flame, she threw herself into the old man's arms and said, "My lord, long time no see. Do you still remember Yuan, who was cruelly sent to the palace by you?" The fat old man, the former lord of Chunshin of Chu State, and the current king of Chunshin of Great Chu, chuckled as he slapped Yu Tan's voluptuous buttocks and said, "I remember, how could I not? You even gave birth to a chubby boy for me. Too bad that boy was not lucky enough, as he was killed by someone after being the king of Great Chu for a few days. TSK, who is this beauty?" Lord of Chunshin, Wuxia, licked his lips and fixed his gaze on Yu Ji. Yu Ji smiled gently, bowed to Wuxia and said, "Yu Ji offers greetings, King of Chunshin. I have long heard of the great name of Lord of Chunshin." Wuxia's gaze was as sharp as a blade, as if he could rip off all of Yu Ji's clothes. He laughed in a deep voice and said, "You are Xiang Yu's woman? He seems to be very lucky with women. Where is Xiang Yu? I wonder if I can get you with the land of 3 provinces? Yu Ji, you are indeed a beauty." Yu Tan pursed her lips, pinched Wuxia's waist, and gave him a hard twist. "My lord, could it be that you still have the same old temperament, falling in love with every girl you see? Perhaps Yuan was wrong to come back, and she should not have come back? For the past 2,000 years, Yuan has been trapped in that cave abode, cultivating the heaven-breeding script of Goddess Su, thinking about you day and night, hoping that with my cultivation base, I can once again make you happy. But it seems that Yuan should not have come back today." Yu Ten gave Wuxia a heavy punch, then spun and left. This punch caused Wuxia to howl in pain. The punch had sunk a foot deep into Wuxia's body, almost shattering Wuxia's protective clothing. Behind Wuxia, several hundred armored soldiers pulled out their weapons at the same time, bringing with them countless shadows of ghosts and deities as they charged towards Yu Tan. How dare you? Cried Huangxia sternly. This is my princess, your mistress, Li Yueyan. From now on, when you see her, it is the same as when you see me. Do not disobey any of my orders. Huangxia rubbed his waist, which was nearly pierced by Yutan's punch, then spread his arms and pulled Yutan into his arms. Yueyan, my little sweetheart, I was just joking. How could that brat Xiangyu agree to sell his woman to me? It was just a joke, ha ha ha. You see, after so many years, I've been keeping the position of princess for you. He breathed out a deep sigh, then said in a deep voice, I've even kept the position of prince for you and my child. As long as you can give birth to a child for me, the future king of Chunshen will be that child. Wearing a complicated and slightly bitter smile, Huangxia gently stroked Yutan's cheek and said in a low voice, It has been over 2,000 years. I have countless beautiful girls by my side, but it took me a lot of effort to find you. I know you must have come here, but why haven't I heard any news from you during these 2,000 years? Yutan sighed lightly, then put her arms around Huangxia's 5 feet tall waist. We'll talk about this later, she said in a low voice. Are you here for these 80,000 elite soldiers of Xiangyu? If you don't strike now, these 80,000 elite soldiers will be completely destroyed. Huangxia grinned coldly. He straightened his back and said coolly, His Majesty has asked me to come here and help Xiangyu. His Majesty's divination technique has reached an unfathomable level, and he has predicted that Xiangyu will face a bloody calamity this time. Since this is His Majesty's decree, I'll naturally obey it. But although I'm here, if these men of Xiangyu refuse to listen to my military order, there's nothing I can do. He sighed, hugged Yutan, and suddenly threw his head back and gave a loud roar. I, Huangxia, am here. Xiangzhuang, His Majesty has issued a decree. Bring your soldiers back here at once. When Xiangzhuang, who was leading his soldiers and fighting fiercely against the condemned prisoners of Daqin, heard Huangxia's roar, he turned his body swaggeringly, gave Huangxia a hand gesture, and said, Old fool, you have no right to interfere in the affairs of Xiang clan. Motherfucker, which bastard opened the teleportation array, and let this old man run over here and be so nosy. When I get back, Lao Tzu will definitely chop his entire family into pieces. Upon hearing Xiangzhuang's roar, Huangxia clapped his hands contentedly, laughed joyfully, and said, Look, the 2 imperial concubines are my witnesses. Xiangzhuang is ignoring me. Even if all 80,000 soldiers die here today, it has nothing to do with me. Yueyan, the smell of blood is overwhelming here. Let's return to my fief and live a carefree life. Hehe, Xiangyu, if he dies here, the great Chu dynasty will be cleared. Yutan smiled faintly and quickly exchanged a glance with Yuji. While Yuji was about to say something, a tremendous force suddenly came smashing down from the sky. Lord Chunshen, Huangxia? I'd like to invite you to Daqin as a guest. I wonder if I can invite you here? Chapter 244. A dark cloud slowly descended from the sky. Behind Ing Zheng's back, 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent could be vaguely seen twisting and roaring amidst the dark cloud. Li Si, Su Fu, Gigazi, and a few other civil officials were standing on the cloud, looking down at Huangxia. On the other hand, Ing Zheng was laughing complacently, staring straight at Huangxia like a hungry wolf who had just laid eyes on a little lamb, wishing he could swallow Huangxia into his belly in one bite. If he could subdue Huangxia, a large portion of Great Chu's overall strength would fall into Ing Zheng's hands. In Ing Zheng's eyes, Huangxia was not an enemy, but a glittering mountain of gold. If he could not persuade Huangxia to surrender, he could just kidnap him. In any case, Huangxia was an important figure of Great Chu, and since he had bumped into him, he could never let him go. A dark cloud rose from the top of his head, and the cauldron of Yu had come rolling out from it, bringing with it a great wave of water. The cauldron had accumulated a great amount of blood and energy essence, and the patterns of various monsters on its surface were moving slowly like living creatures. An immense pressure came crashing down from above, pressing down on Huangxia and the others. Ing Zheng had exerted all his cultivation base, pressing down on Huangxia with all his might. With a stern air of an emperor, he said word by word, If Duke of Chunshen is willing to surrender to me, you will enjoy the title of a king for generations to come. I will also treat you with the courtesy of a master. After a brief moment of pondering, Wuxia raised his head, looked at Ing Zheng, smiled and said, "Treat me with the courtesy of a master? I don't care about that. If you want me to surrender to Daqin, I can." You can change the way you address me, call me by a nice name. I'll now mobilize my army and annihilate the mighty army of Great Chu. I'll deploy all the armies in Chunshan Kingdom and cooperate with Qin army in attacking Great Chu." Ing Zheng's face flickered and he cried out sternly, "As long as Duke of Chunshan says it, I'll do it." Li Si and Su Fu's faces flickered, and they were about to dissuade Ing Zheng when Wuxia laughed out loud in a strange voice. "Tisk, that's great. Ing Zheng, actually, I've wanted to tell you this over 2,000 years ago, but I never had the chance. TSK, call me father, then kneel down and give me a few kowtows, and the Chunshan Kingdom will be yours. Ha ha ha, good boy, say something." Ing Zheng's face turned green with anger. "Wuxia, you are a hero of the generation, but you are worse than a ruffian," he bellowed. Then he waved his hand casually, and the vast amount of dark gas behind Ing Zheng's back condensed into several hundred black thunderbolts, each the size of a water tank. Wuxia laughed wildly. Holding Yu Tan's waist, he transformed into a gust of wind and disappeared without a trace. Even with Gigazi's cultivation base, he failed to see what escape art Wuxia had used. Gigazi felt the natural energy around him move, as if there were tens of thousands of tiny auras of living beings fluctuating in the mountain ridges. Then Wuxia, Yu Tan, and the hundreds of armored warriors behind him disappeared. The two beauties, Qi Bin and Lu Mei, looked at each other. Then they raised their hands and clapped lightly. When they clapped, a heavy rain began to pour down from the sky. The raindrops were mixed with tiny snowflakes and frost, and the cold air instantly froze the several hundred miles wide flat land into a world of ice and snow. Qi Bin and Lu Mei breathed out a faint sigh. Together with the several dozens of serving ladies standing beside them, they moved their bodies and blended into the heavy rain and frost, disappearing without a trace. Suddenly Gigazi cried out, "This is not the escape art of cultivators, but the heaven and earth ghosts, deities and spirits magic of those barbarians. Compared to our magic, they can utilize the natural energy more directly, and are even more mysterious and unpredictable. These two girls are barbarian girls, and they are not from the same place as us." Yuji sighed lightly. She raised both hands up, and there was a faint dark gleam flickering on her arms. Several hundred huge thunderballs fell into her palms, and with a gentle rub of her delicate hands, they vanished into nothingness. Then she leaped onto a cloud and flew slowly into the sky, quickly fleeing into the distance. A practitioner with the cultivation base of mid-stage nascent soul realm standing behind Su Fu cried out sternly, "Little girl, how can you leave so easily?" The practitioner dashed forward and casually waved his hand in the air. Immediately, a black rune flashing with lightning bolts emerged out of thin air. He pointed a finger at Yuji and cried out sternly, "Stay here. His Majesty's harem is in need of a beauty that can topple a nation." Yuji smiled coldly, and her body vanished abruptly. At the same time, she reappeared behind the practitioner with her graceful figure. She thrust her palm out casually, like a red-hot knife cutting into a piece of butter. Soundlessly, Yuji's tiny hand went into the practitioner's body and came out from his dantian. On Yuji's slender fingers was a nascent soul, which was struggling and roaring wildly. Yuji smiled faintly and clenched her fist. The practitioner's nascent soul immediately turned into countless specks of light and drifted away. Her body flickered again, and before the furious Su Fu could stop her, she had already appeared on top of a mountain about 100 miles away. She looked at them from afar and said softly, "His Majesty, the first Emperor of Daqin, Ing Zheng? If you want to take Yuji into your harem, you need to defeat His Majesty. Yuji is the woman of His Majesty, and unless you defeat him, I will never leave with your Majesty." Another beam of light flashed, and Yuji's body had disappeared without a trace. Yuya walked out from Ing Zheng's coach, looked at the direction where Yuji disappeared, and said coolly, "Over the past 2,000 years, Yuya has been spending time with Yuji and Li Yuan. What Yuji is cultivating is the celestial technique of Goddess Xian, the legendary goddess of the 9 heavens. She has reached 70% mastery in it, and is impervious to water and fire. Weapons made of metal and metal cannot hurt her, and neither can the magic of the 5 elements. Her cultivation technique is very profound, and with just a thought, she can travel 10,000 miles away. Even a cultivator who has formed his nascent divinity cannot catch up with her with the divine ability of teleportation. Yu Yao smiled faintly and said in a deep voice, "With her help, Xiangyu will undoubtedly have a pair of wings on his back. Your Majesty, you need to be careful." That Li Yueyan, what cultivation technique is she cultivating? Asked Ding Zheng in a deep voice. Over the past 2,000 years, Li Yueyan has been cultivating the heaven-breeding script of Goddess Su. As the name suggests, it allows her to condense the body of Goddess Su and give birth to the power of the heavenly Tao. If an ordinary man were to possess her body, he would be able to condense a Jin Dan out of thin air. If an expert like Huang Xie were to possess her body, with the help of that heavenly energy of Dark Yin, he would most probably be able to break through the realm of heaven immortal very quickly. On top of that, it can help Huang Xie shed his mortal body and form his nascent divinity. In the future, the speed of his cultivation will be greatly improved. Ying Zheng's body turned stiff. He stared at Yu Yao and said coldly, "Think of a way to capture Li Yueyan alive. I want this heavenly energy of Dark Yin." Yu Yao nodded her head lightly and said, "Perhaps there is a way. Before Li Yueyan holds a certain level of authority in the Chunshin kingdom, Huang Xie can never touch her. There will be a chance." Yu Yao pursed her lips into a gentle smile, then gently tidied Ying Zheng's slightly messy collar and said, All right. Don't be like how you used to be, trying to snatch every good thing you see. Let's settle the serious business first." Without Xiangyu, the overall strength of Xiangyu's mighty army has dropped by more than 1-fold. Eradicating them first is the most important thing. Faint noises of rolling waves could be heard coming from within the cauldron of Yu. Countless shadows of aquatic demons, each the size of a sesame seed, were seen struggling and twisting amidst the sea of blood, while letting out faint but clearly audible cries. Leading the mighty army of Xiang clan, Xiang Zhuang had slaughtered countless condemned prisoners of Daqin. Even the several dozens of condemned prisoners with the cultivation base of nascent soul realm were killed by Xiang Zhuang and Xiang Ta. When the mighty army of Xiang clan formed into a formation and mounted on the single-horned rhinoceros, although they were not equipped with chariots, the combative strength of several tens of thousands of Xiang clan cavalrymen was more than enough to shock anyone. It was especially true when Xiang Ta was holding a long black banner in his hand, summoning several tens of thousands of divine undead soldiers from the nearby Clay City and charging together with them. It made it even harder for the condemned prisoners of Daqin to stop them. Wherever the mighty army of Xiang clan went, corpses were strewn all over the ground. Blood splashed and soared into the sky, while countless dead bodies and skeletons were scattered all over the ground. However, the blood essence of all the Daqin prisoners who were killed had vanished into thin air, sucked into the cauldron by Su Fu and the others using a mystic technique. More and more condemned prisoners of Daqin kept rushing down from the mountain ridges, pouring into the flatland and crazily charging towards the mighty army of Xiang clan. Coldly staring at those prisoners who were desperately fighting for their lives, Ying Zheng suddenly said in a cold voice, "It's about time Su Fu do it now. If these condemned prisoners can make some contribution to me, Daqin, before they die, it will not be in vain that they have come to this mortal world. After they are dead, we'll just have to absolve them of their crimes." Su Fu cupped his fist and answered. After that, a strange gleam flickered in his Dharma eyes of yin and yang, and a black rune that was glinting with an immense evil aura took shape on his forehead. Suddenly, the bodies of the condemned prisoners of Daqin who were charging at high speed turned stiff. The rune on their foreheads suddenly shone brightly, and then their heads exploded at the same time. Countless blooms of blood bloomed in the air, as the blood essence of these dead prisoners suddenly appeared in the cauldron of Yu. Meanwhile, their body fluids, bones, and flesh exploded and turned into a dark poisonous liquid that blotted the sky. Together with a pungent smell of medicine, the liquid transformed into a dark torrent that blotted the sky and blotted the earth, rushing towards the mighty army led by Xiang Zhuang. Xiang Zhuang gave a loud and stern cry, while a large amount of blood-red light burst out from the body of the several tens of thousands of mighty soldiers under his command, protecting them tightly. The dark poisonous liquid clashed forcefully with the blood-red light, quickly corroding the blood-red light and depleting the energies in the bodies of the mighty soldiers at an incredible speed. Amidst sizzling noises, the blood-red light became thinner and thinner, and gradually became as thin as a thin piece of paper. It looked like it was about to be completely corroded by the poisonous liquid. Clang! Suddenly, the enormous amount of blood essence accumulated in the cauldron of Yu transformed into a huge stream of energy, and was absorbed by those ferocious aquatic demons trapped in the cauldron. These aquatic demons, who had been trapped in the cauldron for an unknown number of years, threw their heads back and roared furiously into the sky. After absorbing the energy transformed from the blood essence, they opened their mouths and sprayed out a stream of prime demon energy. The bright, pitch-black demon energy towered into the sky, injecting into the bodies of the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent who were wheeling and wheeling behind Yin Zheng's back. The bodies of the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent, which were originally about 1,000 feet long, suddenly expanded to about 3,000 feet. No matter it was their size or their aura, both had increased by a few times. The ripples of energy emanating from Yin Zheng's body became like the raging waves of the ocean. The vast and endless ripples of energy transformed into dark mists that one could see with naked eyes, rolling and rolling out from Yin Zheng's body. Using the blood essence of several million condemned prisoners as a sacrifice, and borrowing the mighty divine power of the Cauldron of Yu, Yin Zheng had forcibly elevated his cultivation base to a realm that was infinitely close to the realm of heaven immortal. Yin Zheng threw his head back and let out a loud laugh. Casually, he produced the sword of Emperor Qin, which transformed into a 1,000 feet long flood dragon. Abruptly, it transformed into countless golden sword energies that shot out in all directions, thrusting towards the mighty army of Xiang clan down below. 9 dragons cauldron grand magic sword sweeps 6 directions, cried Yin Zheng. Countless golden sword energies blanketed an area of 1,000 miles in circumference. The color of the weather changed, and the natural energies were all sucked dry by the sword energies. There was no other aura or light between the heaven and the earth, only Yin Zheng's black dragon energies and golden sword energies that filled the void. Several tens of thousands of divine undead soldiers were ripped to shreds by the sword energies, and one after another, the mighty army of Xiang clan was torn to pieces amidst the raging golden tides. Large groups of single-horned rhinoceroses threw their heads back and howled, trying to break out from the area covered by the deadly sword energies. But the sword energies were everywhere, enveloping everything. One after another, all the single-horned rhinoceroses fell to the ground with blood spraying out from their mouths, their bones, flesh, and souls shattered by the sword energies. Xiang Zhuang, Xiang Ta, and all the captains of Xiang clan roared furiously and leaped into the sky, burning the fiend energy pearls in their bodies, trying to defend against the boundless sword energies. But when the sword energies flashed, Xiang Zhuang, Xiang Ta, and all the other captains fell down from the sky, bathed in blood. Xiang Ta roared furiously. Casually, he threw out a couple dozens of talismans made from bamboo boards, which transformed into a large sheet of green light that enveloped all the trusted captains and personal guards of Xiang clan, then vanished into thin air. Less than 3,000 captains and soldiers of Xiang clan managed to escape, while the rest of the mighty army of Xiang clan were all slaughtered by Yin Zheng. Chapter 245. Outside Meng Fortress, the 5 demon kings of Meng Mountains were besieging Xiangyu, sending his bones and flesh flying in all directions. It was especially true for Jin Jia and Xiong Wanling. These 2 demon kings were ferocious by nature, and they did not like to attack their enemies with magic. Instead, they would resort to violent attacks. Wherever their punches and kicks went, blood and flesh would fly in all directions. Su Meier's pinkish flying sword, and He Qianqiu's cranebeak scissors kept piercing Xiangyu's body, breaking his bones and making him scream miserably. However, the one that hurt Xiangyu the most was undoubtedly Huo Wuyu's rotting bones and soul-devouring energy. Not only was the vicious corpse energy melting Xiangyu's muscles and bones, it was also crazily corroding his nascent divinity. Through Wuqi's mystic eyes of universe, Xiangyu's nascent divinity was struggling to resist the attack from the blood shadow of the celestial fiend behind his back. Then, under the double attack of the corpse energy, Xiangyu's nascent divinity was like a flickering candle in a raging wind, about to be extinguished at any time. Once the nascent divinity was extinguished, everything would turn into nothingness. With a cold gaze, Wuqi looked at Xiangyu, who had no strength to fight back. Suddenly, he waved his left arm and activated the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield. Several tens of thousands of dragon scale-shaped golden beams were shrouded in a thick layer of yellowish earth energy, thrusting straight towards Xiangyu amidst deep, muffled wind-breaking noises. Each of these dragon scale-shaped golden beams weighed several hundreds of thousands of kilograms. Coupled with the high-speed impact, which was a few times faster than the speed of sound, the force brought by these golden beams was enough to easily penetrate several dozens of lofty mountains. Countless golden beams pierced through the rotting bones and soul-devouring energy like a thunderstorm, smashing viciously onto Xiangyu's body. Xiangyu's pale black bones were brutally struck by these golden beams. The incredibly sharp dragon scale-shaped golden beams were extremely heavy and fast, shattering his bones inch by inch. Countless golden beams shuttled back and forth, smashing and smashing on Xiangyu's body, peeling off the last bit of his skin and flesh, and shattering his bones layer by layer. Deep, muffled noises of collision kept ringing out. Suddenly, Xiangyu's body was left with a head shrouded in a blood-red light, while the rest of his body was smashed to pieces by the golden beams shot out from the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield. All 5 demon kings were taken aback by Wuqi's response. Only they knew how tough Xiangyu's body was. They had to rely on their own strength and the power of upper-grade magical treasures to tear his body apart. The fact that the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield could hurt Xiangyu's fleshly body proved that the power of this magical treasure was not weak at all. They glanced at Wuqi almost at the same time. The shape and aura of the dragon scales were very conspicuous. They recognized the origin of these golden lights. The golden light was covered in a thick yellow earthy aura, causing them to nod slowly. They knew that Wuqi had bought a clump of innate earth element energy essence during the Rare Treasures Conference. However, they did not expect Wuqi to refine this thing into a protective magic treasure so quickly. This kid is really lucky. Wuyu took a deep breath, gave a long and loud cry, and sprayed out another clump of corpse accumulating energy. The golden beams shot out from the Earth Element Dragon Scale Shield pierced through the pale green corpse accumulating energy. Only the dragon scales, which were protected by the innate earth element energy, could ignore the frightening power of the corpse accumulating energy and not be corroded by it easily. Wuyu's face turned unsightly. It was obvious that this defensive magical treasure of Wuqi could resist his strongest innate divine ability. After a series of attacks, Xiangyu was left with only a skull. Sparks and blood sprayed in all directions under the joint attacks of the crowd. However, the banner of Qiyu had transformed into a clump of dense blood-red energy and wrapped around the skull. No matter how hard the crowd attacked, they could not do anything to the formidable defense of the banner of Qiyu. Whether it was Wuqi or the 5 demon kings, none of them possessed the murderous aura of the human emperor Xianyuan, which was used to kill Qiyu. It was the only nemesis of the banner of Qiyu, and it was impossible for Wuqi and the others to possess such an aura. Yandan frowned as he stared at Xiangyu's skull, which was shrouded by the banner of Qiyu. The aura of life and death was rolling and rocking violently around him, yet he did not have any good ideas to deal with the banner of Qiyu. Obviously, as he was cultivating the reincarnation technique of 9 death and 9 resurrection, the banner of Qiyu did not have much effect on it. Frankly speaking, the aura of the human emperor emanating from Yandan was not as strong as Ying Zheng's, let alone the ancient human emperor Xuanyuan's. The banner of Qiyu wrapped Xiangyu's skull, and a dense blood-red murderous aura kept rushing into it. The blood-red celestial fiend behind Xiangyu twisted and turned rapidly, crazily invading his nascent divinity. Together with the attack of the rotting bones and soul-devouring energy, Xiangyu's nascent divinity could no longer withstand the joint attack from the 3 parties. Suddenly, his nascent divinity disintegrated, transforming into a sheet of blinding blood-red light that shot out from all 7 apertures of his skull. "You have pushed me too far." Xiang Yu's voice slowly came out from the hideous skull. Yuji, I've waited for over 2,000 years, and this is how you treat me. Xiang Yu howled mournfully. If that is the case, I will sacrifice myself and become a fiend, transforming into the true body of a celestial fiend. I will abandon all the mercy, compassion, warmth and kindness of mortals, and transform into the true ancient war devil of Qiyu. I will fight for supremacy with all of you, and we will see who is the true lord of the heaven and earth, and who is the #1 hero under the heaven. The blood-red celestial fiend behind Xiang Yu quickly fused into his skull. The banner of Qiyu transformed into a sheet of glittering light and fused into the skull. Xiang Yu's nascent divinity was reborn in his spiritual ocean. It was a blurry and sticky figure formed from countless amounts of blood. Although the figure was still blurry, as if it had not completely taken shape, it was already emanating a boundless fiend flame and murderous aura. Wave after wave of frightening aura that could make one's blood boil, and make one grab the weapon in one's hand and slaughter wantonly, was gradually spreading out from within Xiang Yu's skull. Princess Zhongli's face fell suddenly. Xiang Yu's skull grinned hideously and said, "How dare a little girl like you trap me with the soul-sealing curse? Break!" As Xiang Yu gave a light cry, a tiny blood-red dot flickered in the void, and a hair-thin blood-red flame shot out from it, following closely behind Princess Zhongli's soul and the soul-sealing curse she unleashed. Then, the faint connection between the soul-sealing curse and the soul-sealing curse began to burn towards Princess Zhongli. Princess Zhongli's curse was completely broken, and her soul was injured by the backlash. Suddenly, she coughed out a mouthful of blood. Upon smelling the scent of blood, the blood-red flame accelerated towards Princess Zhongli. Wuxia casually waved his hand, transforming the earth element dragon scale shield into a thick and heavy yellow energy barrier that enveloped him and Princess Zhongli. 36,000 dragon scales began to circle around Wuxia according to the orbits of the stars in the universe. Accompanied by the roars of countless wandering souls, the blood-red flame rushed over and slammed viciously onto the dragon scales and the yellow energy barrier. A loud boom rang out, and the blood-red flame exploded. Wuxia and Princess Zhongli were knocked flying away by a tremendous murderous force, falling into the Meng fortress in a sorry state. They smashed through several dozens of tall buildings in a row before finally smashing to the ground. Fortunately, they were protected by the earth element dragon scale shield. Although they suffered some shock, they were not seriously injured. Holding Princess Zhongli in his arms, Wuxia sprung up to his feet and cried out sternly, "Cultivators of Meng Fortress, listen to my command. Kill Xiang Yu with thunder magic. I'd like to see if this Xiang Yu is really unkillable and indestructible." Xiantian cultivators could not lock down Xiang Yu from 100 miles away with their divine sense. However, Jindan human immortals and earth immortals of nascent soul realm could use their divine abilities to injure their enemies from 100 miles away. With the title of Westfield Headquarters Deputy Chief Supervisor, Wuxia gave out his order. Among the several tens of thousands of cultivators in Meng Fortress, there were 20 nascent soul cultivators and over 100 Jindan cultivators. One after another, they locked down Xiang Yu with their divine sense, unleashing various spirit talismans and magical techniques. Bolts of thunderbolts mixed with the rotting bones and soul-devouring energy struck Xiang Yu's skull, exploding and filling the sky with blinking blood-red light. The fiend flame of the banner of Qiyu surged higher and higher, while the skull protecting Xiang Yu let out a deafening roar, leaving behind a beam of blood-red light as it fled towards the depth of Meng Mountains. Once again, the natural energies from all directions rushed crazily towards Xiang Yu, fusing into his skull. On his skull, strands of skin and flesh grew out at an incredible speed, while blood-red hair grew out from his scalp as well. Very soon, a 10-feet-long blood-red hair grew out from his skull. Amidst a series of cracking noises, a newly born, pale black, half-transparent spine poked out from underneath his skull. With this spine as the center, ribs, pelvis, and many other bones kept growing out. In just the time of a few breaths, all the bones in Xiang Yu's body were completely reborn. On top of that, the defensive strength of this newly born skeleton was at least 10 times stronger than before. When Xiong Wanling's bare paw, Jin Jia's hammer, Su Meier's flying sword, and He Qianqiu's crane beak landed on Xiang Yu's body, they could only produce large amounts of sparks and leave deep marks on his skin. None of them could break his bones. The thunderbolts that blotted the sky kept falling down, but they only covered Xiang Yu's bones with a thick layer of thunderbolts, and failed to break his defense. Even when the most vicious rotting bones and soul-devouring energy kept sprinkling on Xiang Yu's bones, it could only produce large amounts of blood-red ripples, and could not cause any more damage to his body. The banner of Qiyu shot out from the top of Xiang Yu's head, shrouded in an eerie blood-red gleam. The blood-red gleam that covered the area of 1,000 feet in circumference kept Huo Wuyu's soul-devouring energy at bay. Xiang Yu, who had given up the persistence in his nascent divinity and chose to completely fuse with the fiend soul he cultivated, had gradually transformed into a true immortal fiend body. The defensive strength and recovery ability of his body had been improved to an astonishing level. On his glowing bones, dark purple muscles, meridians, and blood vessels began to grow at an incredible speed. Before long, when Xiang Yu had just fled tens of miles away, his body had fully grown, and it was even stronger and taller than his original body. At first glance, the muscles on his body looked like alloy ingots, sharp and angular, glinting with an eerie cold gleam. The banner of Qiyu was spinning at an incredible speed. Just as Xiang Yu was about to flee into Meng Mountains, a plume of dark mist suddenly towered up into the sky from the front. Amidst the dark mist, 8 crocodile-shaped black alligators with 2 horns on their heads leaped out, opened their mouths and pounced viciously toward Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu, who had just recovered his body and was still very weak, was thrown to the ground by the tremendous force of these alligators. The banner of Qiyu rolled up, unleashing a blood-red beam that rolled up 5 alligators and threw them several hundred feet high into the air. However, a few crocodiles leaped onto Xiang Yu's body and tore a deep wound on his chest, from which sticky blood kept spraying out. "Who dares to hurt me?" Xiang Yu bellowed furiously. A thunderclap rang out, as a chariot pulled by 4 horses and escorted by several hundred guards flew out from the mountain ridge. On the chariot stood a handsome man, clad in a black robe, and wearing a black and gold crown on his head. The young man, clad in the 8 dragons soaring cloud robe and holding a long spear, cried out sternly, "Xiang Yu, you will die here today. Is Yandan here? I am Ing Ziying the Daqin, and today, I will settle the score with Xiang Yu for killing me in the past. Yandan, Yandan. Let's join hands and kill Xiang Yu. Isn't that a pleasure?" Princess Zhangli blinked her eyes and asked, "Ing Ziying? Who is he? I can't believe he is also cultivating the 9 dragons cauldron grand magic, and he has even formed the power of 8 flood dragons." Meanwhile, Wuxia took a deep breath and said, "Ing Ziying, I suppose he is a member of Ing Zheng's imperial clan?" Ing Ziying, the last monarch of Qin dynasty, the Prince of Qin. Chapter 246. Holding the spear in his hand, Ing Ziying had 8 alligators roaring into the sky behind him. They kept slamming and attacking Xiang Yu, leaving many wounds on his body. Alligators were a species of flood dragons, and among all flood dragons, they could only be considered as lower-grade flood dragons with a thin bloodline. However, they had thick and heavy scales, a very strong brute force, and 4 sharp claws that could cut through mountains. Although they had a very low status in the flood dragon clan, their overall strength was not weaker than a true flood dragon. If they could transcend into a heaven immortal and transform into a true dragon, their overall strength would only be about 30% of the strength of a true flood dragon. But when they were still flood dragons, their overall strength would not be weaker than any middle or upper grade flood dragon with a very pure bloodline. Ing Ziying was also cultivating the 9 dragons cauldron grand magic, and the dragon souls he used were 8 alligators, which gave him some of the characteristics of alligators, namely, a strong fleshly body and a matchless divine strength. In terms of the strength of his fleshly body, he was a few times stronger than Ing Zheng, who had formed the 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent. It was just that he was not as strong as Ing Zheng in terms of divine abilities and magical power. Now he alone was able to stop Xiang Yu, who was severely wounded, and was able to fight Xiang Yu without falling into a disadvantageous position. Xiang Yu threw his head back and roared furiously. As the coiling dragon spear was destroyed in the fierce battle just now, Xiangyu could only fight the enemy with his bare fists. He waved both fists in a disorderly manner, throwing a series of punches at Ing Ziying's face and head. Ing Ziying wielded the spear in his hand in a strict manner. None of his moves were fancy, but they were as powerful as a great mountain, pressing down on Xiangyu with his divine strength. As Xiangyu was severely wounded and had just entered the fiend state, he could not withstand the power of 8 flood dragons unleashed by Ing Ziying. As a result, he was pushed back by the spear, and the tip of the spear kept poking out streams of blood from his body. Xiangyu kept letting out deep and mindless roars, and like a wild beast that had gone mad, he kept leaping and attacking Ing Ziying desperately. Although he had consumed too much of his strength, and his offensive strength had been greatly reduced, the recovery ability of his body had reached an abnormal level. In just a few breaths of time, the wounds left by Ing Ziying on his body were completely healed. No matter how Ing Ziying had left over 100 transparent wounds on Xiangyu's body, he still could not kill Xiangyu. Coldly, Yandan watched the fight between Ing Ziying and Xiangyu. Suddenly, he raised his right hand and cried out, "Generals, listen to my order. Join forces with Prince Ing of Qin and kill Xiangyu." Yandan gave the men around him a wink, then his lips moved slightly as he gave out another order, to cooperate with Ing Ziying in killing Xiangyu, and letting Ziying take the vanguard. After killing Xiangyu, he immediately unleashed his full strength and captured Ing Ziying alive. If they couldn't capture him alive, they would kill him on the spot. Jingku was the first to let out a loud laugh. With a twist of his body, he abruptly transformed into a dazzling white beam that was as thick as a fist, piercing through 100 miles of void and piercing straight through Xiangyu's body. The Tai-Bai Sun-Piercing Dragon technique was derived from Jingku's assassination of Ing Zheng, the Emperor of Qin, in a fit of rage. It was like the Tai-Bai Sun-Piercing Dragon, a rainbow piercing through the sky. The grand white essence qi in his body condensed into a beam of white light with extremely strong penetrating power, like a divine weapon. Even if it was an upper-grade magic treasure or a spirit artifact, it would be pierced through by the beam of white light without any resistance. As for Xiangyu's body, a hole the size of a bull was left behind by the white beam that Jingke had unleashed. On top of that, the wound was smooth and clean, without any burrs. The flesh and blood on the wound kept wriggling, trying to heal his body. Yet, there was a very powerful and sharp energy lingering near the wound. Right when the newly grown flesh and blood began to grow, it was immediately shredded into pieces by the sharp energy. Even with Xiangyu's fiendish immortal celestial fiend body, he still could not heal the wound in a short period of time. Jingke gave a long and sonorous cry, as he transformed into a figure several tens of miles away, surrounded by wisps of white mist. He gasped lightly, looked at Xiangyu, threw his head back and gave a loud laugh. "Xiangyu, little punk, do you think a strike from Jingku is enough for you to endure?" The Tai-Bai Sun-Piercing Dragon technique had gathered all the energy in Jingke's body, allowing him to unleash a desperate strike. By concentrating all his spirit, energy, and spirit into one spot, he would be able to unleash an incredible force. This was the essence of Jingke's cultivation technique. Therefore, although it was just a single strike, it had taken a great toll on Jingke. The strike had consumed about 50% of his energy, and that was why he was panting and hurriedly circulating his breath to restore his cultivation. A blood-red gleam shot out from Xiangyu's eyes, as he glared at Jingke and howled into the sky. "Jingke, I'm going to kill you." Xiangyu's body and nascent divinity had both been turned into fiendish. At this moment, he had lost all his senses. The more damage he suffered, the stronger his instinct would drive him to attack. Jingke's strike had caused a very serious damage to his body. Immediately, Xiangyu abandoned Ing Ziying, who was attacking him with all his might. Roaring and roaring, he sprinted towards Jingke while emanating a blood-red gleam that blotted the sky. Ing Ziying gave a loud laugh, then waved his spear and unleashed several dozens of black beams that took the shape of an alligator and a dragon, hitting Xiangyu in a row. These heavy blows ripped a large amount of flesh and blood from Xiangyu's body, exposing his pale black bones. The banner of Qiyu let out a shrill roar of a warrior, while a large sheet of blood-red gleam rushed out from Xiangyu's body and fused into the banner, covering an area of 1,000 feet in circumference and firmly protecting Xiangyu. Ing Ziying thrust his spear again, but when the dragon-shaped beam hit the banner of Qiyu, it only produced a few insignificant blood-red ripples, and did not hurt Xiangyu at all. On the contrary, Ing Ziying's spear was twisted and turned by the banner of Qiyu, causing a severe pain in his wrist, and nearly making the spear fly out of his hand. Ing Ziying was greatly shocked. He quickly dragged the spear and retreated backward, but Xiangyu's attention was once again attracted by his attack. Without hesitation, he thrust his fist towards Ing Ziying. Suddenly, a vast and mighty murderous blood energy sprayed out from the banner of Qiyu, quickly fusing into Xiangyu's fist. It transformed into a fierce tiger fist with a sharp horn on its head, thrusting towards Ing Ziying's back amidst a shrill tiger roar. When this several hundred feet long blood-red tiger made its appearance, the surrounding natural energies were immediately swept away, and all the flowers and trees in the woods withered and died at the same time. An immense aura of death soared up from the ground, transforming into countless pitch-black palms that grabbed towards Ing Ziying's body amidst cruel ghost howls. Ing Ziying was caught off guard, and was grabbed by these black palms that came out of nowhere. His body was tightly gripped by these black palms, and he could not move at all. The blood-red tiger approached his body at an incredible speed, and when it was about to reach Ing Ziying's back, it shrunk into a fist about the size of a human head, then smashed brutally into the middle of Ing Ziying's back. A loud boom rang out, followed by countless battle bugles. The dragon robe worn by Ing Ziying was ripped to shreds, and his spine was broken inch by the fist. Blood burst out from his 7 apertures, and he was knocked flying several miles away by the fist. Seeing that Ing Ziying was severely wounded by Xiangyu, Yandan clapped his hands and said with a loud laugh, "Excellent! Quickly capture Ing Ziying alive." Before his words could fade away, all the guards brought here by Ing Ziying gave a loud cry at the same time. Suddenly, their skins exploded, revealing their metallic bodies that shone with a dazzling gleam underneath. These guards were all metal demon figurines that had their faces covered with human skins. When they saw their target was wounded, they immediately revealed their true faces, striding towards Ing Ziying. Several hundred demon figurines stood in a circular formation around Ing Ziying. Dazzling gleams could be seen flashing and blinking under their feet, as they quickly formed into a large teleportation formation. An enormous amount of energy rushed out from these metal demon figurines, and surged into the teleportation formation, providing it with enough power to break through the void. Suddenly, Ing Ziying and the several hundred demon figurines' bodies turned blurry, and then disappeared into thin air. MOD stared at the direction where Ing Ziying and the demon figurines disappeared with astonishment. He smiled delightedly and said, "By carving a part of the teleportation formation into these demon figurines, when needed, these several hundred demon figurines can activate the restrictive spells in their bodies, and immediately form a moving teleportation formation." It was indeed a strange and wonderful idea, too wonderful for words. This must be Gigazi's ingenious idea. How could anyone else have such an ability? Sun Kuang nodded his head, smiled, and said, "It must be Brother Wang Su's idea. Chiman Duanjia, mechanisms and concealed weapons. Under the heaven, only Brother Wang Su alone can fight against Mo sect." MOD rubbed his palms excitedly and said, "I wonder how powerful these demon figurines of Qin army are. Perhaps, Mo sect will have to bring out all those powerful war machines produced by them over the years, and have a final showdown with Qin army. Especially the Mo city. This old man has always wanted to see exactly how powerful the Mo city is." While both of them were praising Gigazi's divine ability, on the other side, Yandan had personally brought many captains and ministers, encircling Xiangyu in 3 layers of encirclement. The 3 of them led many great Yen cultivators, and deployed various restrictive spells and formations, completely covering the void. Xiangyu was roaring furiously and slashing left and right, but there was no way he could break through. Fan Yuqi, whose body was burly and huge like an iron ingot, held a pair of crescent-shaped halberds in his hands, and fearlessly rushed up and engaged in a close combat with Xiangyu. The main cultivation technique Fan Yuqi cultivated was the earthly indestructible body of indestructible sect. As a result, his fleshly body was incredibly strong. There was also a very powerful innate spirit item hiding in his body, which seemed to be an earth element innate spirit item. Fan Yuqi's fleshly body had been nourished and tempered by the innate earth element energy for over 2,000 years, and the incredible defensive strength of his fleshly body made even Wuxia, who was watching the battle, shake his head. He is just like a stone in a latrine pit, smelly and hard. I can't break it. Wuxia could not help but shake his head as he watched Xiangyu land several hundred punches on Fan Yuqi's body in a row, only producing a large number of sparks, and not even a single hair of Fan Yuqi's was harmed. The tempering of the fleshly body was a laborious and time-consuming work. Fan Yuqi also had an innate earth element spirit item with him, and the earthly indestructible body that he had spent over 2,000 years to cultivate had reached the limit of the fleshly body below the realm of heaven immortal. Unless it was a heaven immortal, not even Waning Dragon King could leave a single scratch on his skin. Compared to Fan Yuqi's fleshly body, Wuqi's Dharma body of earth immortal was as fragile as the shell of an egg. Let it go. He has been cultivating for over 2,000 years, but how long have I been cultivating for? Wuxia bared his teeth and stared at Fan Yuqi, who was fighting head-on with Xiangyu. He felt a sharp pain in his teeth. Suddenly, another golden light flashed. Among the 5 demon kings, Gold Armor, who had the strongest fleshly body, had joined the battle as well, working together with Fan Yuqi to restrain Xiangyu. Gold Armor's true form was a strange beast, the Gold Devourer. Since he was young, he had been devouring gold element energies. Therefore, his fleshly body was extremely strong, even stronger than Fan Yuqi's. With 2 fellows with freakish fleshly bodies tangling with Xiangyu, he had no chance to escape. It seemed that the group of Great Yan's ministers were about to kill or capture Xiangyu on the spot. But suddenly, a pitch-black crack opened up in the void, from which came 2 huge hands that looked like they were carved out of white jade, pressing down slowly. With a point of a finger, the defensive formation laid out by Great Yan's tens of thousands of cultivators was shattered. Fan Yuqi and Gold Armor let out a muffled snort as they were knocked flying 100 miles away, their bodies sinking several dozens of miles deep into the ground. Then the 2 huge hands gently grabbed Xiangyu, bringing him into the dark crack in the void. Your Majesty Yin Dan, Xiangyu is the strongest general of Great Chu. We can't let your Majesty kill him. Great Chu's Chu Ping offers greetings. Great Chu and Great Yin have never had anything to do with each other. Our greatest enemy is Daqin. Why don't Great Chu and Great Yin join hands and fight against Daqin together? Looking at Xiangyu, who was quickly dragged into the dark crack by the 2 huge hands, Yin Dan pondered for a brief moment, then cried out sternly, "All right." Chapter 247. A muffled rumble echoed out, as the city gate of Meng Fortress slowly opened. Together with Wuqia, 10,000 warriors clad in dark green armors, blood-red capes draped over their shoulders, helmets adorned with blood-red swan feathers, and armors so polished that they looked like mirrors, walked slowly out of the city gate and lined up in a formation to welcome the guests. The sound of drumming echoed out. Behind the formation, Yin Dan was seen sitting on a chariot, walking slowly out of the city. Amidst the mountain ridges outside the city, countless grasses and trees suddenly swayed even though there was no wind. The rustling of the pine trees shook the ground. Amidst the dense grasses, countless tiny wildflowers suddenly sprouted, blooming in large patches of colorful flowers. The splendid sea of flowers stretched from the mountain ridges far away to the city gate of Meng Fortress. A very strong natural energy was emanating from these lowly wildflowers. The natural energy unleashed by these wildflowers that could be found everywhere was comparable to those spirit herbs that had been growing for several hundred years. Amidst the grasses and trees that swayed even though there was no wind, one could vaguely see the shadows of a great number of mountain ghosts and wild deities. These ghosts and deities had blurry faces, and their clothes were oddly ancient. Judging from the energy ripples emanating from them, the weakest among them was equivalent to a cultivator of Jin Dan realm. A few of them were clad in an ancient long robe, with a tall crown on their head, and their facial features clear like a living person. The energy ripples emanating from their bodies were almost at the same level as the 5 demon kings. However, these mountain ghosts and deities were, After all, living beings of Yin nature. They were constantly restrained and suppressed by the righteous energy of the heaven and earth. Although the energy ripples emanating from them had reached the realm of nascent divinity, the overall strength they could unleash was still much weaker than the 5 demon kings. Nevertheless, the number of these mountain ghosts and deities was huge. At first glance, Wuxia estimated that there were at least several 100,000 of them, and perhaps there were at least 100 nascent divinity ghosts and deities hiding among them. Due to the restraint of the heaven and earth, the overall strength of these ghosts and deities was suppressed. However, when nearly 100 ghosts and deities, Chi-Chi, who emanated the pressure of nascent divinity, appeared, their overall strength still made Yandan's face turn stiff. A bright green gleam shone from Wuqi's eyes, as he stared greedily at these mountain ghosts and deities. These ghosts and deities were all extremely condensed in deity bodies. If one could capture them alive and refine them with the divine flame of order, they would be able to greatly nourish one's soul and nascent divinity. To any cultivator, they were the best tonic. The most amazing thing was that although these wild mountain ghosts were emitting terrifying waves of magical power, their strength was on average 1 level lower than their cultivation level. If they really wanted to make a move, even a nascent soul-level ghost could be easily taken down. Soul and primordial spirit were the foundation of a cultivator. Being able to improve it even a little bit was a great opportunity. The sudden appearance of so many wild mountain ghosts and deities in front of Wuxia was equivalent to a large number of great tonic pills taking the initiative to deliver themselves to him. Wuxia was already thinking about how to subdue a few of these ghosts and deities. Gusts of chilly wind brushed past their ankles and brushed past their ankles. Suddenly, those ghosts and deities saw Chi-Chi bowing to them and said, "We, the lonely souls of the wilderness, offer our greetings to the Emperor of Great Yin Dynasty. May Great Yin Dynasty enjoy the eternal reign and reign for all ages." A loud boom rang out, as a lofty mountain in the distance suddenly crumbled and crumbled. A giant serpent, about 1 mile in diameter, its body covered in pale golden scales, its head protruding with a pair of horns, and a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, slowly squeezed out from underneath the crumbling mountain. The serpent was ridiculously huge, with its body measuring about 1 mile in diameter reaching a height of 70 to 80 miles. With just a wiggle of its body, the gigantic head of the serpent had arrived before the front gate of Meng Fortress. Slowly, the serpent slid down to the ground, lying flat on the ground. The length of its body that was exposed from underneath the mountain was already 70 to 80 miles long, and it was unknown how much more of its body was still hiding under the ground. However, no one really cared how big this serpent was. Just the fact that it had exposed half of its body to the ground had already frightened most of the soldiers in Meng Fortress. Clang! Clang! Some of the soldiers standing next to Wuxia, who were welcoming the guests, dropped their weapons to the ground. Without batting an eyelid, Wuxia turned his head and gave those soldiers who were trembling with fear a glance. It scared them so much that they quickly picked up their weapons and mustered up their courage to stop their legs from trembling. A descendant of Bashi, Wuxia looked at the giant serpent and nodded his head silently. Bashi was one of the largest serpents under the heaven according to the legends. Perhaps, it would be more appropriate to call this Bashi before his eyes as a flood dragon. It had grown a pair of horns, which indicated that it was a flood dragon. Judging from its gigantic size, its muscle strength must be extremely strong. Even though Fan Yuqi and Jin Jiao were cultivators who could defeat their opponents by relying on their divine strength, in front of this giant serpent, they were no different than ants. On top of the giant serpent's head stood a middle-aged man with a tall crown and a long robe, his face handsome. Not a single trace of dermic energy could be sensed from this man, and he looked no different from any ordinary uncle next door. He stood steadily on the head of the giant serpent, quietly looking at Yandan. Yandan was staring at the middle-aged man as well. After a full 15 minutes, he nodded and said, "The Emperor of Great Chu Ping?" Chu Ping smiled and said, "Chu Ping of Great Chu offers greetings, Your Majesty Yandan." He landed on the ground and lightly patted the head of the giant serpent, then walked to the front of Yandan's chariot, nodded his head and said, "Chu Ping has come with the sincerity to form an alliance with Great Yin, to help each other and survive in this world." Yin Dan gave Chu Ping a deep look, pondered for a brief moment, then chuckled and said, "Why Great Yan? Why not some other dynasties?" Chu Ping nodded his head, smiled and said, "Do I need any more reasons? Great Chu is located in the extreme south, while Great Yin is located in the extreme north. It is almost impossible for both dynasties to have any conflict. As the saying goes, befriending the distant and attacking the nearby. It is nothing more than this. If you and I are to form an alliance, it will be a great thing that will benefit both of us, and there will be no conflict of interests." Yin Dan walked down from the chariot and bowed to Chu Ping. Chu Ping returned the bow to Yin Dan as well. After that, both of them entered the chariot hand in hand. Music and drums were playing in the surroundings. Leading a large company of soldiers, Wuxia escorted the chariot into Meng Fortress. Wuxia rode behind the chariot, staring at Chu Ping, who was wearing a gentle expression and a smile on his face, looking just like an ordinary middle-aged uncle. His eyes were filled with curiosity, excitement, and a trace of complicated emotion that could not be put into words. To Wuxia, heroes such as Yin Dan, Zhang, and Xiangyu, the peerless overlords, they were just some names recorded in the history books. Although they left a deep impression in his mind, he did not have much feelings for them. Only this Chu Ping, the minister of Third Lu of Great Chu State, Chu Ping, his influence on the earth had lasted until today. Among all the heroes of the Warring States period, he was the only one who could be engraved in the hearts of the common people several thousand years later, and even had a traditional festival because of him. Whether it was Zhang or Xiangyu, both of them were outstanding in both political and martial arts. However, the only one who could maintain his influence for several thousand years was the minister of Third Lu, Chu Ping. When faced with a man like this, how could Wuxia not feel curious, and how could he not give him a few more glances? Especially because of the professional habit of Wuxia, he exercised the mystic eyes of universe, and stealthily gave Chu Ping a glance at the ordinary clothing worn by him. As a result, through the vision of the mystic eyes of universe, Wuxia found that although the long robe, tall hat, and ornaments worn by Chu Ping looked simple and crude, and did not have any luster on the outside, they were actually glowing with a bright glow, and were densely packed with countless restrictive spells. Everything he has is a treasure. Wuxia sighed with mixed emotions in his mind. It was not a big deal that Chu Ping had a lot of magical treasures, as it was expected for someone of his status. However, when he was observing Chu Ping with the mystic eyes of universe, Wuxia discovered something even more astonishing. Behind Chu Ping, there was a hazy figure hovering about 1,000 feet tall, constantly absorbing a wisp of the power of faith in the void. This is the primordial Tao of divinity. The Tao of divinity used by those mighty living beings in the ancient times. Looking at the tall figure behind Chu Ping, Wuxia could not help but have his heart give a violent jerk. No wonder when Chu Ping struck out a few times, the cultivation base he displayed did not look like the ability that a nascent divinity cultivator should have. It turned out that his main cultivation base was the primordial Tao of divinity, which allowed him to borrow the power of faith from the common people and instantly manipulate the power of faith, turning it into divine power for his own use. Judging from the size of the prime divine soul behind him, Chu Ping could increase his energy by about 10 times at most. Chu Ping was a mighty cultivator who had formed his nascent divinity, and if his energy was increased by 10 times, it would be a frightening overall strength that only a real heaven immortal could possess. What a ridiculously strong monster! Nevertheless, he has enjoyed several thousand years of incense burning on earth, and with the power of faith gathered together, it is more than enough to push him to his current level. Not to mention that he has the power of faith from the common people of Great Chu Dynasty. All kinds of thoughts were tumbling in Wuqia's mind along the way, as he followed Yin Dan and Chu Ping back to the mayor mansion located right in the center of Meng Fortress. Hand in hand, Yin Dan and Chu Ping walked into the main hall of the mayor mansion. All the ministers of Great Yin Dynasty were waiting quietly outside. Everyone could hear the heated discussion between Yin Dan and Chu Ping in the main hall, but no one could hear what exactly they were talking about. Both Yin Dan and Chu Ping exercised their divine abilities and dermic powers at the same time, disrupting their voices. Therefore, only the two of them could know what they were talking about, and what benefits they had offered in exchange. For a whole day and night, Yin Dan and Chu Ping sat in the main hall, having a heated discussion for the whole day and night. Wuxia and the others were standing right outside the main hall, watching both men gesticulating and discussing for a full 24 hours. Finally, both men threw their heads back and laughed out loud. Then, Yin Dan invited them into the main hall, where he and Chu Ping personally wrote 2 copies of the document of alliance. After that, both men signed the agreement at the same time, stamped their fingerprints and seals, and announced it to the heaven and earth, swearing an oath with their prime nascent divinity. From today onwards, Great Yin and Great Chu were brothers. Neither Yin Dan nor Chu Ping announced the specific conditions of the exchange to the public. But from now on, no one was allowed to use weapons recklessly between the 2 dynasties, and those who dared to provoke a war between the 2 dynasties would be killed without mercy. Yin Dan's 10 daughters, 100 granddaughters, and 1,000 great-granddaughters, the unmarried princesses of the imperial clan, would travel to Great Chu, marrying the sons of the imperial clan. Meanwhile, Chu Ping's 10 daughters, 100 granddaughters, and 1,000 great-granddaughters would also be sent to Great Yin, marrying the sons of Great Yin dynasty's imperial clan. Both men also made an agreement that one of their daughters would be married to the crown prince of the other dynasty, becoming the crown princess of the other dynasty. The document of alliance was 36 feet long, with a total of over 200,000 words written on it. Only then did all the clauses of the Treaty of Alliance between the 2 dynasties were written on it. When the Treaty of Alliance was shown to the ministers of Great Yin dynasty, some clauses were covered by restrictive spells, making it impossible for them to see what the secret conditions were. Obviously, these clauses involved the core secrets of both dynasties, and were not something that any random minister could know. After the Treaty of Alliance was established, Chu Ping did not stay any longer. He bid farewell and left swiftly. He did not mention Xiangyu, nor did he mention anything about Wuqi and Yuji. However, Wuqi breathed out a sigh of relief. Since both dynasties had formed an alliance, then Xiangyu would not be able to find trouble with him anymore, right? Chapter 248. Half a month had passed since the secret alliance between Great Yin and Great Chu was formed. During this period of time, it could be considered as peaceful. Great Yin Daqin and Great Chu did not make any big moves. Every day, only the scouts from Daqin and Great Yin would hunt and kill each other in the lofty mountains and lofty ridges of Meng Mountains, wiping out each other's eyes and ears. However, there were no more conflicts that involved more than 100 men, and no cultivators of Xiantian realm or above were involved in any battles. The Blackwater River was a small tributary of the Longyuan River. It flowed through a mountainous region where the rocks were as black as ink, causing the crystal-clear water of the Blackwater River to turn as black as ink. That was why it was called the Blackwater River. Although it had a rather unpleasant name, the banks of the Blackwater River were filled with abundant water plants, and countless wild flowers and trees grew along the river. Every spring, when the flowers bloomed, the banks of the Blackwater River would turn into a sea of colorful flowers, and the splendid colors stretched westward for several tens of thousands of miles. As the Blackwater River flowed through a canyon formed by the cracking of the Earth's crust, both banks of the river were rich in geothermal resources. Almost every few hundred miles, there would be a cluster of hot springs. Hot water kept gushing out from under the ground, and white steam drifted along the river valley. More than half of the valleys along the river were covered by a dense layer of water vapor. The rich geothermal energy, the dense water vapor, and the rich natural energy brought out from under the ground had nourished the flowers and plants along the banks of the Blackwater River, as well as all kinds of spirit herbs. Therefore, the Blackwater River was a famous place in the inner region of Meng Mountains. From time to time, demon kings from various mountains would send their little demons to the vicinity of the Blackwater River to harvest herbs, concoct all kinds of medicines for injuries, or concoct some lower-grade spirit pills. This place was the natural herb storehouse for all the cave abodes in Meng Mountains, a place frequented by demons and devils. Wuqi threw his head back and gasped for breath. Using a wooden stick as a support, he climbed up a small hill lazily and gazed into the distance. Tens of miles ahead of him, the Blackwater River went around a lofty mountain, forming a small lake at the foot of the mountain that was so clear that one could see the bottom. The banks of the lake were filled with abundant water plants, and a large number of colorful wildflowers were blooming beautifully. Separated by a rock ridge that was no more than 10 feet high were 17 hot springs that formed a line. This string of hot springs was like a string of pearls sprinkled on the ground. The colors of the hot springs were gorgeous and dazzling. Yo, what a beautiful place! A three-tailed vixen swayed her slender waist as she climbed up the hill and walked to Wuxi's side. Intentionally or unintentionally, she brushed Wuxi's arm with her towering breasts. The beautiful three-tailed fox smilingly looked at the small lake, the beautiful grassland, and the 17 hot springs beside the lake. She giggled and said, "This is a great place to have fun. Duke of Tianyan, what do you think?" Wuxi turned his head helplessly, gave the three-tailed fox a look and said, "I, Wuxi, am just following the imperial decree to bring you here to find a hot spring with a beautiful scenery. As for the rest, I, Wuxi, do not know." Panting noises were heard, as Catfish Flood Dragon swayed her huge catfish head and walked up to Wuxi while twisting her fat body. She looked around blankly, shook her head and said, "Is this a good place? Is it beautiful? What's so good about it?" Brother Wuxi, what do you mean by having fun with fun?" The three-tailed fox gave Catfish Flood Dragon a look of disgust, wagging her 3 snow-white tails. She turned her head away proudly, unwilling to give Catfish Flood Dragon another look. If not for the fact that Catfish Flood Dragon's cultivation base was ridiculously strong, at least 1,000 times stronger than her, a little demon fox of early-stage Jin Dan realm, according to her nature, she would have long mocked her. The so-called having fun with fun means using the earth as the bed and the sky as the blanket. Gently waving the folding fan, Sumai walked up the small hill swaggeringly. His eyes kept glancing at the three-tailed fox's voluptuous breasts as he said, "Senior Catfish Flood Dragon, you don't understand these romantic activities. Miss Lu Heng's eyes are indeed the best. I also feel this place is too beautiful to be described with words." The three-tailed fox, Lu Heng, giggled, while her watery, amorous eyes kept glancing at Sumai. Unknowingly, the man and the fox had gotten close to each other, and their bodies were rubbing against each other unintentionally. It was as if there was no one else around them, and they were extremely unscrupulous. Wuxi stared coldly at Sumai. If there were no outsiders present, perhaps Sumai, a playboy, would have long had fun with this three-tailed fox. Sighing sadly in his mind, Wuxi threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh into the sky. Why did he have to take on such an unlucky task? Half a month ago, on the day when Great Yen and Great Chu formed an alliance, Yen Dan had issued an imperial decree, ordering Wuxi to bring his men to the depth of Meng Mountains and find a place with beautiful scenery and a romantic atmosphere. The imperial decree was issued without any rhyme or reason, but Wuxi had no choice but to obey the order. Wuxi was confident that he could find a place with such a beautiful scenery, and he believed that he was qualified to do so. But look at the people he brought with him. As Su Meier's disciple, Lu Heng was known as the vixen with the best taste and the most cultured in the arts. So it was not a big deal for her to follow him to find a suitable place. Blackwater River was a branch of Longyuan River, and it was still acceptable for Catfish Flood Dragon to drive away all the aquatic demons they might bump into along the way. But what about Sumai? Could it be that she needed Sumai, the ever-changing yin and yang, to check the geomancy of a place with beautiful scenery and a romantic atmosphere? Heavy footsteps were heard coming slowly, as Fan Jinqi, who had a tall and sturdy body, walked up slowly like a city wall. He was holding a heavy tiger-tooth halberd in his hand, and on his left wrist was a round shield that was 3 inches thick, while his entire body was clad in a heavy armor that was about 1 inch thick. When he came to the top of the small hill, he glared at Wuxi coldly and cursed under his breath. "Shameless villain, a lowlife." Wuxi looked up into the sky and breathed out a long sigh once again. It was fine if Sumai, who was a fool in the head, followed them, but what was the point of bringing Fan Jinqi with them? A few months ago, during the palace banquet, this fellow had confessed his love to compete for Princess Zhongli's hand. But in the end, together with Sumai, they were severely injured by Princess Zhongli's thunderbolts, and nearly turned into eunuchs. Was it because she was afraid that Wuxi did not have enough troubles to deal with them? A light breeze came blowing, as Qin Qingshui, a skinny man with a long face and a skinny body, came running up the hill with a cold smile on his face. He gave Wuxia a glance and said word by word, "When we look for women in a brothel, that is called dissolute. But Duke of Tianyin, since you have won the favor of Princess Zhonglu, you still raped her? That is called a lowlife." "That's right." A cold voice was heard, as Qin Nihu, clad in a heavy green armor and a long sword hanging from his waist, came striding up the hill. He was the fierce tiger of Qin clan from Qin Wuyang's clan. The same Qin Nihu who had announced during the palace banquet that he would compete for Princess Zhongli's hand, and was nearly killed by the thunderbolts. Looking at the members of this team, Wuqi felt like weeping, but had no tears. Sumai had nearly fused with the three-tailed fox, and both of them were hugging each other. If not for the fact that there were so many people here, they would have taken off their clothes. Fan Jinqi, Qin Qingshui, and Qin Nihu had been mocking and ridiculing him along the way. Wuqi wished he could kill them with a single punch, and then tell their elders that they were all eaten by demons. Yet, such a group of treasures had followed Wuqi out to carry out the mission. No matter how Wuqi looked at it, he felt that Yin Dan was trying to punish him. Coughing loudly, Wuqi pointed at the small lake in the distance and cried out, "All right, this is the place. Lu Heng, Sumai, take a look and see what the terrain is like here. We have been living in the wilderness for half a month, so quickly find a suitable place and return." Upon hearing Wuqi's words, Sumai and Lu Heng, who were still flirting with each other, quickly straightened their faces. Lu Heng sprung up into the sky and looked towards the hot spring, the lake, and the grassland. She counted with her fingers for a while, then nodded and said, "Good place. 5 colors enchant the mind, 5 fragrances confuse the mind, and the scenery here is beautiful. Moreover, it is surrounded by lofty mountains, which can hide the wind and gather the energy. If a man were to come here and see a lone girl, he would definitely have lustful thoughts." Lu Heng shrugged her chest complacently, laughed and said, "With the mystic technique of my enchanting palace, this place will be like a young lady's chamber, where one will have lustful thoughts uncontrollably." Meanwhile, Sumai took out a compass, observed the terrain of the surrounding mountains, nodded his head and praised, 100 miles underground, there is a vein of earth core fire flowing through it. By drawing it up, we can construct an extremely powerful heavenly thunder and earthly flame formation, and it can also provide energy to all the weapons of Mo sect, enough to support them for 2 hours. Then, Wuqi turned to look at Fan Jinqi and the other 2 young masters, and asked coldly, "What do you think, young masters?" Qin Qingshui flew 1,000 feet up into the sky, looked around and praised satisfyingly, "The terrain here is very complicated, and there are many trees and trees in the surrounding forests. It is a good place to hide assassins. With 30,000 assassins here, it will be more than enough to stop the invasion of 1 million soldiers." On the other side, Fan Jinqi and Qin Nihu took a few rounds in the surroundings, nodded their heads satisfyingly, and said with a smile, "Within 1,000 miles, there are many valleys and caves that are suitable for hiding ice armors. As long as we carefully construct a restrictive formation that can conceal aura, it will be more than enough to hide several million armored soldiers. Even if Daqin attacks with all his forces, with this army of several million soldiers, we will be able to delay them for a few days." Wuqi breathed out a deep sigh. Judging from the behavior of these few fellows along the way, it seemed they all knew the purpose of this operation. Yet, as the nominal leader of the team, he had no idea what was the purpose of finding such a place, and what was the reason behind it. Stomping his feet angrily, Wuqi said furiously, "What are you whispering about?" Stunned, Qin Qingshui turned to look at Wuqi. With a strange smile on his face, he said with a strange voice, "Duke of Tianyin, it seems you still don't know? Of course, the reason we are looking for such a blessed place is to kill someone." Shocked, Wuqi asked with a frown, "Kill who?" Qin Nihu said coldly, "The 2 dynasties will join hands and kill Qin." Chapter 249. 2 dynasties, join hands and kill Qin. Kill Qin, kill Qin. Naturally, the person they wanted to kill was the first emperor of Daqin, Yingzheng. With the combined forces of both Great Chu and Great Yan, they had to kill Ing Zheng at all costs. They had to ignore everyone around Ing Zheng. And at all costs, they had to use all the methods available to them. They had to gather all the elite forces of both Great Yan and Great Chu to kill Qin. And they had to kill Ing Zheng. The blessed land with feng shui that Wu Qi had brought his men to was the burial ground specially made for Ing Zheng. Shocked by the news brought by Qin Shui, Wu Qi was still in a daze when he returned to Meng Fortress. However, Wu Qi had a firm mind, and as he had fused the souls of Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai, his experience was not something that any ordinary people could compare with. He calmed his mind, and nervously threw himself into the preparation work. Kill Qin, kill Qin. The thought of killing Qin filled Wu Qi's mind with an evil pleasure. Ing Zheng, the first emperor throughout the ages, if he could participate in the task of killing him, the evil pleasure he felt was simply indescribable. If it were Lu Xiaobai, perhaps he would have long sung a folk song to express his joyful mood. On the same night when he returned to Meng Fortress, Wu Qi was helping Lu Chengfeng to count the huge amount of energy stones and all sorts of strange and bizarre items that were just transferred to Meng Fortress from Great Yan's national treasury. Suddenly, Wu Qi felt a gaze filled with killing intent sweeping across his body. It startled Wu Qi, and he hastily turned his head and looked over his shoulder. A group of palace guards was escorting a fat old man, who was walking slowly through the arched door that led to the backyard of Mayor Mansion. Wu Qi's face flickered. He recognized this old man, as he was none other than Lu Buwei, who pretended to be Wei Sanju. He looked exactly like this when Lu Buwei paid a visit to Lu Chengfeng. Lu Chengfeng noticed that something was wrong with Wu Qi's expression. He hurriedly turned his head to look at him. Lu Chengfeng was taken aback when he saw Lu Buwei. Then he hurriedly put down the account book in his hand and asked a few aides to take over his work. Then he strode toward Lu Buwei. With quick steps, Lu Chengfeng rushed to the side of Lu Buwei, bowed deeply and said, "Greetings, benefactor. May I know why benefactor has come this time?" Lu Buwei laughed dryly, then said coolly, "Duke Yanlu, I don't deserve the title of benefactor." Ha ha ha. Lu Buwei had never suffered such a loss in his entire life. If I had lost to someone else, I would have accepted it if it was someone I was familiar with. Unfortunately, this old man actually tripped over a nameless junior. In the future, Duke Yanlu, please don't ever address me as benefactor again. I don't deserve it. Lu Chengfeng was struck dumb. As he was about to say something, Wu Qi had already stepped forward, grabbed Lu Chengfeng's shoulder and threw him 7 to 8 steps back. Wu Qi stared at Lu Buwei, revealed a joyful smile and said, "So, you are old Mr. Wei Sanju? TSK, wasn't Wei Merchant declared as a rebel by Great Yan Dynasty? Why are you here? Could it be that you were captured alive?" Lu Buwei was so angry that his brows knitted together. He fixed his eyes on Wu Qi, flicked his sleeve and said coldly, "Little brat, I don't want to talk to you." A ferocious gleam filled with a towering killing intent flashed in the depth of his eyes. Laughing coldly, Lu Buwei spun and walked away. Wu Qi grinned coldly, his face turning stern. Since he had already offended Lu Buwei, he might as well offend him even more, making him feel even worse. Wu Qi said coldly, "Lu Buwei, I was the one who killed Wei Longfeng. I was the one who killed Wei Xiaoxiao. And I even seized all her magical treasures. It is also because of me that Wei Merchant was annihilated." A coin glinting with a misty light appeared in Wu Qi's hand. Wu Qi tossed the coin up and down, then put it back into his body. Lu Buwei's face suddenly turned pale, and then his face suddenly turned purple. But very soon, his complexion returned to normal. He smiled, cupped his fist and bowed to Wu Qi, then said with a calm expression, "Duke of Tianyan, I will definitely repay the great kindness you have shown me in the future. I'm now under the imperial decree of His Majesty, and from today onwards, I'm also a minister of Great Yan. In the future, as Duke of Tianyan and I will be the ministers of the same dynasty, we must get to know each other better." Wu Qi was taken aback. Lu Buwei had become a minister of Great Yan? What kind of joke was this? Wei Merchant had its branches spread across all the kingdoms, and Lu Buwei had been secretly controlling it from behind the scenes. He must be living a free and unfettered life. So, why would he suddenly become a minister of Great Yan? If that was the case, didn't it mean that Great Yen had pierced a deep nail into all the other kingdoms? Yandan had picked up a great bargain. The question was, why would there be such a miraculous change? When Lu Buwei saw the shocked expression on Wu Qi's face, he could not help but burst into a loud laughter. Holding his head up proudly, he swaggered into the backyard. A fragrant scent wafted through the air, as Princess Zhonglu came drifting out with a group of guards. She stared at Lu Buwei's back and said in a low voice, "Zixian has just found out the news. Imperial Grandpa has threatened this old man with his 3 sons, forcing him to swear an oath to join Great Yen and become its minister. According to Imperial Grandpa, this old man is very intelligent, a very formidable man. If he joins Great Yen, it will bring great benefits to Great Yen." Gently hugging Wu Qi's arm, Princess Zhonglu shook her head in confusion and said, "But, is this old man really so formidable? Wasn't Wei Merchant eradicated by you, Wu Qi? Weren't you the one who killed that Wei Xiaoxiao and Wei Longfeng? This old man's sons are so useless, and they don't look very formidable at all." Wu Qi gave Princess Zhonglu a surprised look, rubbing his temples as if he had a headache. Just because of his 3 sons, Lu Buwei had submitted to Great Yen? Suddenly, he recalled that a few months ago, he heard that a few core members of Wei Merchant were captured alive in Ji City. Could it be that Lu Buwei's 3 sons were among them? But it was just 3 sons. How could an ambitious and ruthless man like Lu Buwei be willing to accept his fate and become Great Yan's minister just because of his 3 sons? Suddenly, a figure appeared right next to Wu Qi. It was Lao Ai, who had a devilish and evil aura. With his hands clasped behind his back, he stared at Lu Buwei's back and said coolly, "Do you know why he submitted to Great Yen just because of his 3 sons? Because this old man can no longer give birth to any more sons. He is cultivating the 5 ghosts' grand magic, and his body has become half human and half ghost. He can no longer give birth to any more sons. He only has 5 sons in total. Half a month ago, 2 of his other sons were killed in the capital city of Daqin, Xianyang, and those who were captured alive by Great Yen are his last 3 sons." Wu Qi stared at Lao Ai, puzzled as to why this evil man would explain all these to him. It seemed like there was only enmity between him and Lao Ai, but not any friendship. Lao Ai could see the puzzlement in Wu Qi's mind. He said coldly, "This old fool has an old grudge against me. He is now Prince Wenxin of Great Yen, and also the left Prime Minister of Great Yen. Left Prime Minister, this is a position with real power." Wu Qi finally understood. The appearance of Lu Buwei, and the fact that he had joined Great Yan's imperial court in such a domineering manner, and became Great Yan's minister, was a great threat to Lao Ai, who had an old grudge against Lu Buwei. Or perhaps, Lao Ai was still jealous of the treatment Lu Buwei received. After all, he was only the Prince of Chongqing of Great Yen now. Apart from the title of king, he had no real power. In the future, there was no way they could become friends. Compared to the old grudge between Lao Ai and Lu Buwei, the friction between Wu Qi and Lao Ai was really nothing. Or perhaps, Lao Ai had never regarded Wu Qi as his opponent. All his attention was focused on Lu Buwei. Therefore, when Lu Buwei showed up, Lao Ai immediately came forward to rope in Wu Qi, because he wanted to find a strong ally for himself. Staring at the arched door that led to the backyard, Wu Qi said coldly, "When did this old fool agree to join Great Yen?" "Yen Dan did a good job of keeping it a secret," said Lao Ai coldly. After he captured Lu Buwei's 3 sons alive, he began to negotiate with Lu Buwei in secret. It was not until half a month ago, when 2 of Lu Buwei's sons were killed in Xianyang, that he agreed to join Great Yen. After Yen Dan promised him countless benefits, this old traitor accepted the title of Prince of Wenxin and the position of left Prime Minister. Laughing mockingly, Lao Ai continued in an indifferent tone, "In order to rope in this old traitor, Yen Dan has acknowledged him as his master." Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh and said, "If that is the case, Wu Qi will not be able to return to Ji City in the future. This old fool must have his eyes on me." Lao Ai also breathed out a long sigh and said, "Now that this old traitor has become one of Great Yan's men, we are all in trouble. This old fool deserves to be punished for not being able to give birth to a son." Unknowingly, Wuqi and Lao Ai were standing side by side. Suddenly, a feeling of being bound by a common hatred for a common enemy arose in their hearts. But soon, with a strange expression on their faces, they quickly separated from each other and glared fiercely at each other. Lao Ai snorted coldly, spun and left without hesitation. Wuqi gave a few sneers as well, then wrapped his arms around Princess Zhongli's waist and left quickly. For the next few days, as the deputy chief supervisor of Westfield headquarters, Wuqi was so busy that his feet barely touched the ground. Even with his current cultivation base, he nearly fainted from the exhaustion. The top-secret strategic forces of Great Yin Dynasty were constantly mobilized from all directions. All kinds of strange tools were transported to Meng Fortress, and then secretly transported to the mountain ridge near the hot spring he had chosen a few days ago, where they were installed and hidden. A massive amount of personnel, materials, and all the data that came and went had to be recorded by Wuqi and Lu Chengfeng. On top of that, all the movements were absolutely confidential. Not only did they have to prevent any insider from leaking the information, they also had to guard against the spying of Qin army scouts. The massive amount of work gave Wuqi a feeling that his brain was about to evaporate. In the next few days, Chu Ping brought many ministers of Great Chu and came to Meng Fortress in secret. This news was completely sealed off. After Chu Ping and his men entered Meng Fortress, they never showed themselves again. Even Wuqi only knew that they were here. As for how many of them came, and who they were apart from Yan Dan, Jing Ku, and a few other core figures, no one else knew the details of the situation. More and more troops and materials kept being transported to Meng Fortress. Under the overall arrangement of Wuqi, Lu Chengfeng, and a few others, these people were sent to the hot spring and set up an ambush. A great amount of energy stones and formation diagrams were sent to the edge of the hot spring by the Blackwater River, and a great number of formations were engraved and carved. All kinds of preparation work had further squeezed out what little energy Wuqi had left. When Wuqi felt that he was about to have a mental breakdown, all the preparation work was completed, and the plan to kill Qin Dynasty had entered the final stage of actual operation. Wuqi could not help but feel extremely curious about this plan. Although he had participated in the entire process of preparation work, Wuqi only knew a tiny part of it. He had absolutely no idea how Yan Dan and the others were going to plot against Ing Zheng. He was really curious. Would Ing Zheng be so easily fooled? Chapter 250. Which son of a bitch came up with this idea? Could it be that they had already planned this out? Amidst the lofty mountains of Meng Mountains, Wuqi, whose body was covered in blood, was leading a few Xiantian soldiers, who were covered in cuts and bruises. This was the dividing line between the scouts of Great Yin and Daqin's armies. The scouts of both armies often fought and attacked each other in this forest, and in every forest, there might be an elite assassin of the opposing army hiding. After leaping across a valley that was over 300 feet wide, Wuqi staggered and landed on the opposite bank. However, the soldiers behind him did not have this kind of cultivation. They abruptly stopped at the opposite side of the gorge. Several crossbows shot out from the forest behind them, hitting the soldiers in the back and piercing through their bodies, throwing them into the gorge. The valley was about 1 mile deep, and when these soldiers fell into it, they were instantly turned into a puddle of meat paste. Clad in a heavy armor, Qin Nihu shot out from the forest behind him, treading on a bright beam. He was followed by 2 cultivators who were hovering in the air without using any magical item. Obviously, they were earth immortals with the cultivation base of nascent soul realm. Apart from that, he was followed by 12 Jindan human immortals, who had all sorts of strange signs behind their backs. The group of men flew out with hideous smiles on their faces, while Qin Nihu cried out coldly, "Where is your luck, Duke of Tianyin? Where is your luck? Hee, you didn't expect to bump into us in the wilderness, did you?" Nearly 1,000 feet behind them, Qin Qingshui was seen running toward them, panting heavily, together with several dozens of beast warriors of scouting office. Although there were shadows of beast souls flashing behind their backs, it was obvious that they had activated the power of the beast souls and possessed the overall strength of Xiantian realm. However, compared to the cultivators who could fly, their speed was still a little slower, and they could barely keep up. In just a blink of an eye, Qin Nihu and his company had crossed the valley and arrived at a place less than 1,000 feet away from Wuxia. While staggering forward, Wuxia loudly cursed all 18 generations of Qin Wuyang's ancestors. After that, he fished out a blood-red jade bottle from his bosom, poured out a blood-red pill, and shoved it into his mouth. A black mist gushed out from behind Wuxia, within which a small flying sword was flying back and forth like a thief, but it was much more eye-catching than before. Taking a deep breath, Wuxia turned around and bellowed furiously. Qin Nihu, if I don't die today, I'll never let go of your Qin clan. Qin Nihu flew over to Wuxia at top speed, sneered and said, We will not rest until one of us is dead. Why are you still talking nonsense? With a wave of Qin Nihu's hand, the human immortal Jin Dan behind him abruptly raised the immortal striking crossbow, a secret weapon from Mo sect, and unleashed a torrent of bolts towards Wuxia. Wuxia cried out in alarm. With a sway of his body, he transformed into a clump of yellow mist and plunged into the ground. However, his speed was still a little too slow. Before he could transform into a clump of yellow mist and plunge into the ground, an immortal striking crossbow bolt had already pierced through his shoulder, shooting several hundred feet away while bringing up a stream of blood. Wuxia let out a miserable howl as he quickly plunged into the ground. In just a blink of an eye, he had traveled several miles away, and then emerged from the ground once again. On Wuqia's left shoulder was a fist-sized, see-through hole, from which blood kept spraying out. His body was riddled with dozens of wounds, all of which were bleeding profusely. After he took the blood-red pill, the strange sign of Jin Dan behind him had become a little clearer. But after traveling several miles through the ground, the strange sign of Jin Dan behind him had become dim again, as if it would disintegrate at any time. Qin Nihu cried out sternly, Go, go! Kill him! We can't let him escape back to Meng Fortress. If not because he was peeping at a beautiful girl bathing, we wouldn't have found such a good opportunity to kill him. Kill him, then return to the fortress and capture that Xiangyu's girl alive. She will be given to His Majesty, and that will be a great merit. Panting heavily, Wuxia kept sprinting forward. He looked very miserable, as if he had consumed too much of his energy, and could no longer control the flying sword, nor exercise any escape art. In a forest not far away from him, under a patch of tall grass, a few Qin scouts carefully peeked out from the gaps between the grasses. As there were 2 earth immortals of nascent soul realm, and 12 human immortals of Jin Dan standing beside Qin Nihu, these scouts dared not to make any noise. In the hand of the scout leader was a fist-sized crystal pearl, aiming right at Wuxia. There was a bright gleam flickering in the crystal pearl, as deep as the pupil of a wild cat. Several thousand miles away, on a platform that was dug out from the waist of a lofty mountain, Yingzheng was sitting high up on a dragon throne, staring coldly at a screen of light in front of him. The crystal pearl in the hands of the few Qin scouts was a peculiar magical item crafted by Gi Guzi using the eyeball of a strange beast, the blue-eyed cloud cat. Through a certain spell, the user could receive everything that the crystal pearl saw and heard within a distance of 1,000,000 miles. In the screen of light, Wuxia was fleeing in a very sorry state. His blood was splattered all over the ground, and a few wounds on his body went straight through his internal organs. If not because he had the cultivation base of Jin Dan, which gave him a much longer life force than ordinary people, these wounds would have been fatal. The strange sign of Jin Dan could be vaguely seen behind his back. Obviously, his energy had been greatly depleted. He did not flee by riding on an escape beam, and had only exercised an escape art with the help of some medicinal pills. After fleeing for a few miles, he had no choice but to emerge from the ground once again. Obviously, his meridians were severely injured as well. Even though he had consumed a very powerful medicinal pill that could stimulate his potential, it still could not support him to escape successfully. Yingzheng looked at the scene of Wuxia fleeing in a very sorry state through the screen, and could not help but burst out into laughter. This little fellow is the thief who stole my black dragon spirit ring. Can any of my subjects tell me why this little fellow is being hunted by Great Yan's own people? Su Fu took a step forward, sneered and said, Your Majesty, according to the information I've obtained from the spies I've planted in Great Yan's territory, This little fellow Wuxia was conferred the title of nobility because of his good luck. But he overestimated his own strength and got himself involved in the dispute between two internal forces of great Yin dynasty. The man who is chasing after him, the one who is treading on a light wheel, is Qin Nihu, the youngest son of Qin Wuyang. Because he is fighting over Princess Zhanglu, the youngest daughter of the crown prince of Great Yin, he has become the enemy of Wuqi. Su Fu pointed at Qin Qingshui, who was panting and chasing after Wuqi with several dozens of beast warriors. He sneered and said, "This Qin Qingshui is from Qin Wuyang's clan. He is greedy and incompetent, but he was once the chief supervisor of Central Wind Guard of Great Yan's scouting office, a man with a high position and great power. But because he had a conflict with Wuqi, he was implicated in some matters and lost his official position. Both Qin Nihu and Qin Qingshui have a very serious grudge against Wuqi." Su Fu fixed his gaze at Wuqi, who was fleeing in a panic through the light screen, and said coldly, "Obviously, Wuqi brought a few men to investigate the military situation in the forest. But somehow, he bumped into his enemies, and Qin Nihu and Qin Qingshui came up with the idea to kill him on the spur of the moment. Wuqi was born in the wilderness, and he does not have any foundation in the imperial court. As for Qin Nihu, he only has 2 earth immortals of nascent soul realm. So, how could Wuqi be their match?" While Su Fu was explaining the conflict between Wuqi, Qin Nihu, and Qin Qingshui, Qin Nihu had almost caught up with Wuqi. Stepping on a light wheel, Qin Nihu had arrived at a distance of less than 500 feet behind Wuqi. Qin Nihu cried out happily, "Capture him alive. I want to humiliate him slowly, and let him know the consequences of fighting over Princess Zhanglu with me. How dare a lowly bastard like him covet the princess of Great Yin?" 2 earth immortals laughed strangely, then performed an incantation gesture, and unleashed a restrictive spell towards Wuqi. Suddenly, the rocks and soil around Wuqi exploded, as an invisible force tightly bound them together, then quickly wrapped around Wuqi's body. Wuqi howled at the top of his voice. "Do you really want to risk your life?" Then he gave a loud roar that carried a double meaning. Suddenly, a dozen golden talismans suddenly appeared in Wuqi's hand. Casually, he threw the talismans over his back, then threw his body forward forcefully and threw himself onto the ground. The talismans exploded, unleashing a great sheet of flame that swept across the land about 1 mile in circumference. In the void, numerous fireballs fell whistling down like meteors, smashing and smashing the ground, turning the soil and rocks into scorched earth. At the same time, countless thunderbolts as thick as water buckets came smashing down with loud booms, smashing straight onto Qin Nihu and his company. Through the light screen in front of Ying Zheng and his company, 2 earth immortals of nascent soul realm standing next to Qin Nihu were badly charred by the thunderbolts and flames. They were knocked back several thousand feet in a sorry state, coughing out mouthful after mouthful of blood. What Wuqi threw out were all powerful talismans of heavenly spirit sect, with a power comparable to the full force strike of a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator. Meanwhile, all 12 Jindan human immortals had fallen to the ground, severely wounded. Their defensive magical treasures were shattered to pieces, and their bodies were charred as they fell to the ground, twitching and struggling. The light wheel underneath Qin Nihu's feet was also shattered, and his armor was riddled with countless cracks. The tremendous impact caused blood to spray out from his 7 apertures, and he rolled his eyes and fell straight to the ground. His entire body was numb from the thunderbolts, and he could not even move his little finger. Wuqi let out a furious roar, as the sword of greedy wolf shot out amidst a dim dark gleam, slicing straight towards Qin Nihu's neck. Qin Nihu cried out in alarm. His body staggered abruptly, and he barely managed to dodge the deadly sword strike from Wuqi. The sword of greedy wolf sliced through his left shoulder, sliced through his broken armor, and chopped off his left arm from the shoulder. Qin Nihu howled miserably as blood sprayed and splashed from his shoulder. He staggered a few steps back, then fell to the ground. 2 earth immortals of nascent soul realm roared at the top of their lungs. "How dare you do this? Die." They did not have the time to take any medicine to heal their wounds. Like a wild tiger that had gone mad, they raised their sword beams and thrust towards Wuqi's chest with the technique of man and sword as one. Wuqi clenched his jaws tightly, fixing his eyes on the two incoming sword beams. Suddenly he cried out sternly, "Qin Wuyang, I'll curse all 18 generations of your ancestors." Accompanied by his sincere greeting to Qin Wuyang, Wu Qi pulled out a thick stack of explosive talismans, waved his hand and thrust them towards the two incoming sword beams. Talismans of the level of explosive talismans were completely ineffective against Earth Immortals of nascent soul realm. The two sword beams were only slightly shaken to the side, and with an immense coldness, they brushed past Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi howled miserably, took out another handful of pills and shoved them into his mouth, then transformed into a stream of yellow mist and plunged into the ground. However, from the light screen, Ying Zheng and the others could clearly see that one of the two sword beams had pierced through Wu Qi's chest, while the other had brushed past Wu Qi's waist and abdomen, nearly cutting Wu Qi into two halves. Ying Zheng burst into a loud laughter. Clapping his hands and stamping his feet, he said, "This is wonderful. It is so wonderful to see the internal strife between the ministers of Great Yin Kingdom. Quickly record all the scenes and send them to Great Yan's Duke Yanlu mansion. Let the people behind Wu Qi fight with Qin Wuyang." After a few loud laughs, Ying Zheng narrowed his eyes abruptly and said coldly, "What did Qin Nihu say just now? Wu Qi peeped at Yu Ji bathing so. If Yu Ji is there, I wonder." "Ahahaha." He turned his head and looked at Yu Yao, who was sitting next to him. Yu Yao smiled faintly and said, "If Yu Ji is bathing, then Li Yueyan is most likely there as well." Ying Zheng's eyes shone with a bright gleam. Chapter 251. Go after him and kill him. Qing Shui, kill him. You must kill him. Qin Nihu held his severed arm and howled miserably. He is the deputy chief supervisor of Westfield headquarters. If we let him return to Ming Fortress, all of us will be severely punished by the military law, or at least exiled for life. You must kill him. He is severely wounded, and his energy is almost depleted. You must kill him. Qin Nihu roared furiously at Qin Shui, who was running wildly behind him. "Sinecures, save me! Save me! My arm! Put it back on! Put it back on! Sai, hurry up and save them! Wake them up!" Both Earth Immortals coughed out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Forcing their bodies, which were wounded by Wu Qi's talismans, they staggered back to Qin Nihu. Without hesitation, they found Qin Nihu's severed arm and helped him reattach it to his shoulder. However, Wu Qi's sword beam was too powerful. Not only had it severed his arm, it had also corroded and devoured a part of his flesh near the wound. The severed arm found by the two Earth Immortals was as shriveled as a reed stick. Without some rare and precious pills, even if Qin Nihu could reattach his arm, he would not be able to use it freely for the rest of his life. It would also be a great obstacle to his future cultivation base. Looking at his deformed arm, Qin Nihu threw his head back and howled furiously. However, as he was severely wounded, he was a little short of breath. His howls and curses were only a little louder than a cat's meow. Apart from Qin Nihu, who had his arm severed, there were 12 other Jin Dan human immortals lying on the ground. The power unleashed by Wu Qi's talismans was comparable to the full-force strike of an Earth Immortal of mid-stage nascent soul realm. Although two nascent soul cultivators had withstood over 70% of the power, the remaining 30% had still shattered their limbs, and a few human immortals of Jin Dan were on the verge of death. Struggling, the two Earth Immortals ran back to them, and hastily took out handfuls of pills and shoved them into the mouths of these human immortals, fearing that if a few of them died, they would not be able to answer to Qin Nihu when they returned. "Wu Qi, I'm going to tear you to pieces." Bringing with him a large group of beast warriors, Qin Shui ran past Qin Nihu like a herd of mad bulls. As he sprinted, he roared, "Ancestor, rest assured, this Wu Qi is dead for sure today. I want to hack him into 1,000 pieces." A serpent cry soared into the sky, as the beast soul of the dark nether python flew out from behind Qin Shui's back, its 3 huge serpent heads swaying in the air. A chilly wind rose around Qin Shui's body, as the aura emanating from him suddenly rose to the peak stage of Gold Core Realm. The soul of the dark hellish python had almost solidified. It spat out poisonous mist and chilly wind as it chased after Wu Qi. Ying Zheng could not wait any longer, and rose to his feet from the dragon throne. Looking at Qin Qing Shui through the light screen, he praised, "Not bad. Our Daqin also has a set of cultivation technique to cultivate beast souls and beast warriors. However, as he was able to cultivate a beast soul to a level comparable to a Jin Dan level human immortal, it is obvious that this Qin Qing Shui has received a lot of help from Qin Wuyang. It is not so easy to cultivate a beast soul." With the 3 snake heads swaying behind Qin Qing Shui's back, he brought several dozens of beast warriors of scouting office and chased after Wu Qi. This time, with the help of the pills, Wu Qi had condensed a little bit of energy and fled to a distance of over 2 miles away, coming out from behind a mountain ridge in the distance. There was a sword wound on his chest, and blood was gushing out from his waist and abdomen. Faintly, some intestines and internal organs could be seen flowing out of the wound. Right after he came out from the ground, Qin Qing Shui caught up with him while cursing furiously, and was now less than 1,000 feet away from Wu Qi. Abruptly, Wu Qi turned his head, opened his mouth, and shot out the acquired pearls of earth element and wood element, transforming into 2 bright beams, one yellow and the other green, smashing viciously towards Qin Qing Shui. The acquired pearls of earth element and wood element struck onto Qin Qing Shui's body, exploding into a ball of green thunderbolt. The explosion made the nether python behind Qin Qing Shui throw its head back and let out a long hiss into the sky, while spraying out a large amount of poisonous mist. The nether python opened its huge eyes and shot out 3 pitch-black energy arrows from its 3 mouths. 2 of them knocked the pearls of earth element and wood element flying far away, while the last one pierced through the air and accurately pierced through Wu Qi's back, piercing into his body. The nether python's huge eyes opened, and 3 pitch-black energy arrows shot out from its 3 mouths. 2 of the energy arrows knocked the pearls of earth element and wood element flying far away, while the last one pierced through the air and accurately pierced right into Wu Qi's back, drilling into his body. The nether python's beast soul contained an extremely poisonous aura, and in an instant Wu Qi's skin turned black. The blood that oozed out from his body had also turned from bright red to a pale black. Wu Qi's movement slowed down abruptly, and he did not even have the strength to run anymore. 3 beast warriors of scouting office let out a long and sonorous cry. Behind their backs, red clouds intertwined, transforming into 3 clumps of raging flame, and leaped towards Wu Qi. Swinging their blades, they aimed at Wu Qi's neck, waist, and knees. With a somersault, Wu Qi dodged the attacks from 3 beast warriors, then thrust the sword of Greedy Wolf out with a jarring whistle. A sword beam streaked across the air, slicing all 3 beast warriors in half from the waist. Blood splashed in all directions, and the 3 beast warriors roared furiously. Suddenly, their dantians swelled up, and with 3 loud popping noises, their upper bodies exploded. The self-explosion of 3 peak stage Xiantian beast warriors had knocked Wu Qi several hundred feet away. Ying Zheng was laughing happily. He kept looking at Wu Qi on the light screen, who was bathed in blood and fighting fiercely. A large dark cloud had emerged underneath his feet. Qin Qing Shui let out a strange laugh and said, "Wu Qi, if not for you peeking at that pretty girl bathing, how could you be so careless and be severely wounded by my assassin? Hee, that girl must be Xiang Yu's beloved concubine, right? I can't believe you actually slept with such a peerless beauty last time. You're really lucky with women." With the flame of jealousy burning in his heart, Qin Qing Shui sprinted forward and gave a powerful kick to Wu Qi's face, who had yet to land on the ground. A crisp cracking noise rang out, as the muscles on Wu Qi's face were torn by the powerful force. Blood splashed and splashed in all directions. Wu Qi let out a miserable howl, gave Qin Qing Shui a venomous glare, and forced himself to perform an incantation gesture to summon the Earth Spirit Pearl back. He transformed the pearl into a clump of yellow mist and wrapped around his body, then plunged back into the ground. But this time, right after Wu Qi plunged back into the ground, Qin Qing Shui threw his head back and let out a long hiss into the sky like a great serpent. Suddenly, his fists were shrouded in a very dense, dark green poisonous gas, and there were some lightning sparks flashing vaguely within it. 2 yin thunders, which contained strong poison, flew out from his fists and thudded heavily into the ground. Along with a thunderous rumble, the ground within a radius of 1 mile exploded. Hundreds of feet thick mud and rocks were blown up into the air, and countless pieces of rocks fell down. Wuqi's body was sent flying up from the ground, with blood spurting out from his body. He seemed to have fainted, and was sent flying hundreds of feet away by the explosion. Wuqi, Duke of Tianyuan, you are destined to die in my hands. Even Qin Qingshui's eyes were shining brightly. Behind his back, the soul of the netherworld boa suddenly expanded to hundreds of feet tall, widely opened its jaws, and swallowed Wuqi whole. The body of the netherworld boa squirmed, and suddenly, a large amount of black saliva dripped down from its jaws, merging with Qin Qingshui's body bit by bit. The power released from Qin Qingshui's body suddenly swelled up. He raised his head and gave a high-pitched roar towards the sky. Suddenly, a tiny slit appeared between his eyebrows, from which a 3-inch tall, tiny humanoid figure darted out. Judging from the appearance of the humanoid figure, it was obviously another Qin Qingshui. The humanoid figure flew up into the sky and landed right in the middle of the head of the netherworld boa. The feet of the tiny humanoid figure melted into dark smoke, merging with the soul of the netherworld boa. The smile on Ingzheng's face became brighter and brighter. Oh, that little thief who stole my spirit item was killed just like that? He devouring the soul of a beast, transforming his body and condensing his energy. This Qin Qingshui is a lucky man. Very few beast warriors can break through the limitation of Jin Dan and grow into nascent soul realm. He is a lucky man. I'm sure this Wu Qi has some other spirit items with him, or else, it would be impossible for him to provide such an enormous amount of energy for him to make the breakthrough. Before his words could fade away, Qin Qingshui's body suddenly trembled in the light screen. The 3-headed python above his head opened its jaws, and suddenly, 2 more heads grew out from its neck. 5 heads of the python opened up slowly, and 5 acquired spirit pearls were vaguely visible in their mouths, emanating an enormous amount of acquired energies of 5 elements, the Yuanling energies. All the ministers around Ingzheng gasped at the same time, while Baiqi cursed furiously. No wonder this little fellow is so difficult to deal with. He actually managed to gather all the acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements. What a pity, this Qin Qingshui is the lucky one. Bastard. Even I don't have any acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements. Ingzheng looked at the changing expressions of all his ministers and generals around him, then suddenly threw his head back and let out a loud laughter. Pass down my decree. Order the scouts of Yulin army to follow the direction where Wu Qi and his companions fled, and find out if there is anyone taking a bath in the mountains. Zhang Yi, bring some men and capture that little fellow alive. If I remember correctly, that little fellow still has a clump of innate earth element energy essence, right? Take it and keep it with you, nourishing it day and night. It will be enough to bring your acquired magnetic force to a higher level. Zhang Yi was overjoyed, and he quickly bowed and answered. He smiled and said, Your Majesty, please rest assured that I will definitely bring back your treasure. On the light screen, Qin Qingshui was seen taking out a black ring from the big mouth of the beast's soul, which looked like a coiling dragon. He was fiddling with it carefully in his hand. Ingzheng looked at the black dragon spirit ring, and his face turned extremely unsightly. Zhang Yi snorted coldly as well. Stepping on a cloud, he brought several dozens of cultivators under his command and hastily chased after Qin Qingshui and his companions. Meanwhile, Ingzheng cupped his fist at Yu Yao and said with a smile, Yu Yao, lend me a hand and capture that Yu Ji. Yu Yao shook her head with a cold grin and said, Your Majesty is not here to capture Yu Ji alive, but to capture that Li Yuan, am I right? Since Yu Ji is there, Li Yuan is most likely there as well. But that's fine, as the 3 of us sisters can reunite again. She laughed coldly and glared fiercely at Ingzheng, then directly gave an order to Baiqi, Wang Jian, and some other generals of Qin army, sending out a batch of elite soldiers of Daqin dynasty to protect Ingzheng's chariot as they quickly flew up into the sky on a cloud. Beneath the cloud, amidst the woods, the scouts of Qin army and Yan army were still fighting and killing each other. But all of a sudden, large groups of Qin practitioners and cultivators from various sects rushed out like a tidal wave, wiping out all the scouts of Yan army in just a blink of an eye. Wherever Ingzheng's chariot went, the scouts of Yan army, who were fighting with the Qin scouts just now, were all killed in just a blink of an eye. In just 15 minutes, Yingzheng had arrived at the blessed land chosen by Wuxia a few days ago. Several thousand soldiers of Great Chu were stationed quietly in a valley 10 miles away. All of them sat cross-legged on the ground, motionless and motionless. Amidst a pool of 17 hot springs that looked like a pearl necklace, Yu Ji, Li Yuan, and several dozens of pretty and adorable serving ladies were soaking lazily in the hot springs. Separated by a rock ridge that stood about 10 feet tall, on a small grassland next to the lake, a large curtain was tied up using luxurious black brocade. Qi Bin and Lu Mei, together with several dozens of serving ladies, each wearing a tall crown on their head and clad in black robes, were sitting behind the curtain, drinking tea and enjoying the scenery. Vaguely, several hundred shadows of wild ghosts and deities could be seen hovering next to the curtain. Sitting in the chariot, Yingzheng gazed at the curtain from afar. His eyes narrowed into a thin line as he said, "Are those two ladies the imperial concubines of Great Chu that I saw when I was wiping out the mighty army of Xiong dynasty?" Yu Yao sighed lightly, shook her head and said, "Well, you've taken advantage of me again. In those years, the harem of all 6 dynasties were gathered in Xianyang City. Don't tell me you're still planning to do the same thing today?" Yingzheng just laughed aloud, throwing his arms around Yu Yao's waist. Chapter 252. The scouting office had its own set of rules for collecting the bodies of the dead. Together with a group of his subordinates, Qin Qingshui collected all the broken bodies of the 3 beast warriors who had self-detonated, then sprinkled some specially made phosphorescent powder on them. A greenish phosphorescent flame burst into life, silently burning the pile of corpses into ashes. A few beast warriors took out a small black porcelain jar, collected the ashes on the ground, and tied the jar tightly behind their backs with ropes. Qin Qingshui stood before 3 scorch marks on the ground, then said in a deep voice, "You can leave with peace of mind. Wu Qi's soul has been destroyed and turned into the nourishment of the beast's souls. Rest assured, brothers, I'll take good care of your family members." Casually, he tossed the black dragon spirit ring into the air and spun it a few times in his palm. Grinning coldly, Qin Qingshui said, "With this ring alone, I'll make sure your clan members will live a rich and prosperous life." A few miles behind them, Qin Nihu was seen staggering towards them, holding his arm, which was barely reattached with a plaster. Next to him were 2 earth immortals of nascent soul realm, and 12 human immortals of Jindan realm, but they could barely walk. From afar, Qin Nihu roared out, "Qingshui, what are you still talking about? Retreat now. All of us are severely wounded now. If we bump into some experts from Qin army, we will be finished." Qin Qingshui took a deep breath, and a panicked look emerged on his horse-like face. He waved his hands and cried out, "Retreat! Retreat! Retreat now! Damn it! For the sake of killing a mere Wu Qi, I can't believe you have come to Qin army's territory. Brothers, retreat now!" Clang! A clang of a blade rang out, as a Qin scout leaped out from the bushes behind them, slashing a beast warrior of scouting office in half from the waist with his blade. Hiding in the bushes nearby, several dozens of Qin scouts sprung up into the air. One of their leaders shouted out sternly, "Great General's order, kill!" The Qin scouts who sprung up into the air pulled out their blades and hacked down like mad tigers. The beast warriors of the scouting office were caught unprepared, and 5 of them were killed on the spot. Behind them, more Qin scouts rushed out from the dense forest, holding strong crossbows in their hands. Hundreds of bolts were shot out, the arrowheads densely covered with various runes and energy stones. The explosive power of these bolts was almost equal to the attack of a Jindan cultivator. Qin Qingshui and the others were thrown into confusion, and a dozen more beast warriors were hit by the bolts. The runes attached to the arrows exploded. Raging flames, ice thunderbolts, all sorts of attacks of 5 elements blasted the bodies of these beast warriors into pieces, killing them on the spot. Qin Qingshui roared furiously, while the 2-headed dark nether python behind his back threw its head back and gave a long cry into the sky, opening all 5 mouths at the same time and shooting out countless pitch-black energy arrows, hitting accurately onto the bodies of these Qin scouts. The energy arrows exploded with a deafening rumble, and a deadly poisonous aura spread in all directions. All the Qin scouts who rushed out from the forest fell to the ground, howling miserably. Their bodies were attacked by the poisonous aura, and their skin was corroded and sunken. Their muscles and bones were rotting rapidly, and very soon, their bodies had turned into puddles of pus. Qin Nihu, who was rushing towards them, was struck dumb. He howled almost hysterically, "You bastards! You think you can touch us with just the likes of you? Kill them!" He waved his uninjured arm, unleashing a tiger-shaped energy whistling out from his palm. Accompanied by a deafening rumble, it plowed a several feet deep trench on the ground, then leaped into the ranks of Qin scouts who were holding strong crossbows. A tiger roar towered into the sky. The tiger-shaped energy unleashed by Qin Nihu suddenly exploded, shooting out in all directions like countless shooting stars. The energy smashed into the bodies of the Qin scouts, causing their bodies to expand and explode, turning into countless pieces of flesh and blood. Qin Nihu laughed hideously, threw his head back and howled. "How dare you little bugs touch us? Don't you know how to spell the word death?" Suddenly, an invisible and tremendous force came crashing down from the sky, pressing Qin Nihu several hundred feet deep into the ground with a deep, muffled boom. Qin Nihu gave a miserable howl, as at least 40% of his bones were broken. The tremendous pressure had rendered him unable to move, and his muscles and blood vessels were flattened and pressed tightly against his bones. Blood kept bursting out from all over his body, and in just a blink of an eye, he had turned into a bloody man. Together with several dozens of cultivators, Zhang Yi descended from the sky. Invisible magnetic forces were wheeling and wheeling around Zhang Yi, producing deep, muffled noises that sounded like the rumbling of thunder. All the natural energies in the surrounding mountains, rivers, and underground energy veins were absorbed into Zhang Yi's body. After being transformed by his magnetic grand magic, they were transformed into a mighty force that enveloped an area of 1 mile in circumference. Like a god who could decide the fate of all living beings, Zhang Yi hovered midair and looked down at Qin Nihu and his company. Shaking his head, he sighed and said, "A bunch of juniors bullying you is truly delightful." While laughing strangely, Zhang Yi stretched out his right hand towards Qin Qingshui, who had his eyes and mouth wide open, and said, "Young lad, hand over the Black Dragon Spirit Ring and 5 acquired Spirit Pearls. In short, hand over all the belongings left behind by Wuxia, and I'll let you die in one piece." Qin Qingshui gave a strange cry, then suddenly pulled out a 3 feet long, large spirit talisman carved out of yellow spirit jade. He bit the tip of his tongue and sprayed a mouthful of blood onto the yellow jade, then smashed the spirit talisman forcefully onto the ground. A stream of yellow mist soared up from the ground, wrapping around Qin Qingshui, Qin Nihu, and all the others. In just a blink of an eye, they had burrowed into the ground and fled several miles away. It was a 1,000 miles earth-traversing talisman crafted by an earth immortal of heavenly spirit sect. A spirit talisman that was specially given to the juniors of his sect to save their lives and escape from danger. Zhang Yi's magnetic force was produced by absorbing the power of the earth. It could restrain all metals and drive the natural energies of the earth. However, it was helpless against a spirit talisman of such a high grade. In just a blink of an eye, Qin Qingshui and his company had fled several miles away. Zhang Yi was taken aback for a moment, and only then did he come to his senses. He cursed under his breath, then brought all his subordinates and quickly chased after Qin Qingshui and his company. Using a great amount of magnetic force that was as fine as gossamer threads, Zhang Yi's enormous divine will scanned every inch of the underground scene. All the changes of the natural energies underground emerged in his mind. Following the energy ripples emanating from the 1,000 miles earth-traversing talisman, Zhang Yi soon covered a distance of over 2,000 miles. Ahead of them was a great river with rolling waves. Right at the edge of the river, a clump of yellow mist rushed out from the ground. Qin Qingshui and his company were thrown out by the yellow mist in a sorry state, falling and sprawling on the ground. The 1,000 miles earth-traversing talisman was a high-grade talisman. When traveling underground, the speed was very fast, and the pressure was very great. Even with the overall strength of Qin Qingshui and his company, they could not withstand the sudden change of speed. Each and every one of them fell to the ground and threw up as if they were drunk, unable to stand up for a long time. Zhang Yi laughed out loud. Complacently he waved his hand, transforming the magnetic force into a huge invisible hand, grabbing forcefully towards Qin Qing Shui. Black Dragon Spirit Ring. 5 Elements Spirit Pearls. Innate Earth Element Energy Essence. When Zhang Yi thought of those treasures carried by Wuxia, his body trembled with excitement. The Black Dragon Spirit Ring was Ying Zheng's personal treasure, and if he could retrieve it and present it to Ying Zheng, it would be a great merit. The spirit pearls of 5 elements could be given to the juniors of the clan, as they were a good item that could strengthen the overall strength of the clan. Even with the entire storage of the Daqin dynasty, there were only about 30 to 50 of these acquired spirit pearls, and they had long been divided by many important ministers. On average, a wealthy clan did not even have one. As for the innate earth element energy essence, Zhang Yi did not have the overall strength to refine it now, but he could bring it into his dantian and slowly absorb the innate earth element energy essence to nourish his body. He was cultivating the acquired magnetic grand magic, which seized the natural forces and transformed them into magnetic forces, giving him unfathomable divine abilities. If he could transform his body into the innate earth element Tao body, he would be able to cultivate the innate magnetic force, and his divine abilities and magical powers would be improved by more than 100 times. They are all good treasures. Although Zhang Yi had cultivated arduously for over 2,000 years, he still could not restrain the excitement in his heart. Impatiently, he grabbed towards Qin Qing Shui, transformed into a beam of dark light, and quickly approached Qin Qing Shui and his company. All of a sudden, those beast warriors of scouting office, who were fleeing with Qin Qing Shui and his company, threw their heads back and let out shrill cries. Then they sprung up and charged towards Zhang Yi with their sword beams. Zhang Yi was thrown into confusion by the sudden turn of events, and failed to react to what was happening. In just a blink of an eye, Zhang Yi, who had his attention fully focused on Qin Qing Shui, was caught by these beast warriors. Their bodies expanded at the same time, and then exploded like bombs. Dark blood sprayed out from their bodies, bringing with it a pungent smell of blood. Surprisingly, a sword beam that was equal to the full force strike of a late-stage nascent soul cultivator burst out from each of their bodies, slashing viciously onto Zhang Yi's escape beam. Men of sacrifice. A trap. Suddenly, these 2 words popped up in Zhang Yi's mind. He gave a sharp cry, and all the mountains within 100 miles suddenly trembled and crumbled. An enormous amount of energy from the underground energy veins rushed crazily into his body, transforming into an enormous magnetic force that tightly protected his body. Guided by the magnetic force, the sword beams shot out from the self-exploding beast warriors' bodies changed their direction immediately, thrusting towards the cultivators behind Zhang Yi in a messy manner. Not even in their wildest dreams did those cultivators of Qin army expect that Qin Qing Shui and his company, who were being hunted like little lambs, would suddenly turn into hungry wolves. They did not even have the time to take out any defensive magical treasures, as the sword beams swept across them and sliced their bodies into pieces. In a panic, over 20 nascent soul cultivators broke out from their bodies and flew up into the sky, trying to flee towards the campsite of Qin army. Suddenly, a deep muffled cry was heard coming from the great river behind Qin Qing Shui and his company. Nascent souls of human cultivators, they are a great tonic. My children, don't let them go. The surface of the great river suddenly rocked and rocked, as Wanying Dragon King, clad in a golden armor and holding a pair of huge hammers in his hands, brought Lord Xiansheng, Lohai Tanshui, and Hanju, together with several thousand great demons whose bodies were shrouded in rolling water vapor. As they leaped out from the water valiantly, waves of white water quickly converged in the center, surrounding Zhang Yi, the group of over 20 nascent soul cultivators, and tens of Qin army cultivators. Complacently, Wanying Dragon King waved the huge hammers in his hands, pointed at Zhang Yi and his company, laughed and said, "Be obedient and offer me your nascent souls, and I'll spare a thread of your soul for you to reincarnate. I have the virtue of cherishing every living thing, and I never kill anyone. Ha ha ha. We, the people of Dragon King Mansion and Longyuan River, have always been a family of doing good deeds and good deeds." The 5 big heads of the dark nether python hovering above Qin Qingshui's head slowly opened their mouths, from which came flying out 5 acquired spirit pearls that shone with a dazzling light. A series of violent coughs rang out as Wuxia leaped out from the big mouth of the dark nether python, bringing with him a stinking poisonous gas. Wuxia spun around on the sandy beach, nearly falling to the ground. He pointed his finger at Qin Qingshui and cursed at the top of his voice. Did this beast soul of yours grow up in a latrine pit? Why is your stomach so stinky? Pooh. He coughed a few times, then Wuxia called back the black dragon's spirit ring and spirit pearls of 5 elements. He raised his head and smiled at Zhang Yi, who had his eyes and mouth wide open, and said, Old Mr. Zhang Yi, if you're willing, the position of Great Yan's imperial advisor is vacant. TSK, our emperor has acknowledged Lu Buwei as his master, and he is now King Wen Xian, left prime minister, and imperial advisor of Great Yan. If you're willing to submit to Great Yan, you'll be conferred the title of king, right prime minister, and also the imperial advisor of Great Yan. If you're willing to submit to Great Yan, you can choose whichever princess or princess of Great Yan you like. Zhang Yi's fingers trembled. Suddenly, he transformed into a beam of dark light, bringing all his subordinates and their nascent souls, and was about to break through the white water and flee. Wanying Dragon King let out a hideous laugh. Suddenly, he teleported himself above Zhang Yi's head, wielded the pair of golden hammers and smashed them down forcefully. Chapter 253. Soon Yingzheng and his company arrived at the blessed land chosen by Wuxia. The Blackwater River gently circled around the mountain, forming a lake at the foot of the mountain that measured several miles in circumference. The surface of the lake was as smooth as a mirror, and its color was as bright as crystal. The reflection of the green mountain in the water made it look like a huge painting of mountains and rivers painted with ink. Just looking at it would make one feel refreshed, as if they were drinking a fine wine. On top of the steep cliff of the green mountain, a large number of wisterias were hanging down, as if they had been carefully matched by a master craftsman. Every single wisteria and every single flower on it were placed in the perfect position, giving off a wonderful sense of beauty that could make one feel at peace and tranquility. The grassland next to the lake covered an area of approximately 30 acres of land. The grass was growing like a carpet, and every single blade of grass gave off an elegance that was as smooth and clear as jade. All the grasses were clean and tidy, and they served as a foil to the colorful wildflowers growing amidst the grasses, making them look exceptionally gorgeous. These flowers formed a complex, beautiful, and enormous pattern. At first glance, it seemed to be in a mess, but upon closer inspection, one would find that it was in a picturesque disorder. It gave off a comforting feeling, as if one was in one's own home. Separated by a rocky ridge were 17 colorful springs, each measuring about an acre in size and 10 feet in circumference. Hot water kept bursting out from the springs, while white steam that came with a strong smell of sulfur drifted across the surface of the lake along with the breeze. It seemed as if the white steam and the lake water had merged into one, entangling each other as they swayed and drifted across the surface of the lake. Yutan and over 30 serving ladies were lying lazily in the hot spring, quietly enjoying this rare leisure time. Dozens of jade plates and basins of different sizes were floating on the surface of the water, each containing a variety of mountain fruits and wine pots. The colorful fresh fruits served as a foil to these colorful hot springs, making them look even more picturesque. A strong aroma of wine was wafting out from the wine pots, mixed with the strong smell of sulfur, and actually brought with it a magical aphrodisiac aura. Yingzheng and his company were looking down from a high vantage point, and from over 100 miles away, they could clearly see what was happening in the vicinity of the hot spring. The Qin generals who accompanied them lowered their heads and closed their eyes, not daring to take another look in that direction. All these girls were Yingzheng's prey, and there was a high possibility that they would become the concubines in Daqin's harem in the future. As the ministers of Daqin, how could they dare to peep at the naked bodies of Yingzheng's concubines? Only Yingzheng and Yuyao were peeping at the beautiful bodies of these girls without scruples. Looking down from the high vantage point, he could see everything clearly, and even the most private parts of Yu Ji and Yu Tan's hair could be seen clearly. Ing Zheng took a deep breath. Suddenly, his face turned slightly pale, and his body grew 3 inches taller. That woman with the profound Yin body is Li Yueyan? Li Yueyan, who cultivates the heaven-breeding scripture of Goddess Su? As long as I seize her abstrusine body, I'll be able to seize the innate abstrusine qi and become a heavenly immortal? Ing Zheng stared fixedly at Yu Tan, who was lying next to Yu Ji, with a small bunch of red wild grapes piled on her chest. He did not conceal the raging desire in his heart, and asked in a low voice with a hint of greed. It's her. We have been together for over 2,000 years. How could Yu Yao mistake her for someone else? Yu Yao's eyes shone with a cold gleam as she said coolly, Yu Ji possesses remarkable abilities, and her combative strength is very strong. Li Yueyan is an expert in battle formations, and she is the best candidate for the vanguard. If your majesty can take them in, together with Yu Yao's ability to devise strategies, your majesty will have one more helping hand. Suddenly, several dozens of twisting dark shadows leaped out from the surrounding mountain ridges, quickly fusing into the dark cloud beneath Ing Zheng's feet. Standing next to Ing Zheng's chariot, Su Fu said in a low voice, Your Majesty, there are no ambushes in the surrounding mountain ridges. But the guards around those girls are very strong. The several thousand elite soldiers of Great Chu 10 miles away from them all possess the cultivation base of Jin Dan. And they are led by 18 peak stage nascent soul generals. And among those mountain ghosts and deities, a few of them possess the cultivation base of nascent divinity realm. Su Fu took a deep breath, grinned coldly and said, There is a group of mountain spirits and water ghosts of Great Chu hiding under the lake. Sure enough, Great Chu is a hybrid of barbarians, as they have even mastered the technique of controlling ghosts and deities that barbarians specialize in. There are a total of 30,000 mountain spirits and water ghosts in the lake, and they are led by 2 nascent divinity aquatic ghosts. If someone were to attack these girls rashly, perhaps he would be caught unprepared. Ing Zheng sneered disdainfully and said, Although these mountain spirits and water ghosts have a very high cultivation base, the overall strength they can unleash is usually only half of their cultivation base. In those years when Daqin was sweeping across all barbarian tribes, how many wild ghosts and mountain deities had he killed? Tens of thousands of mountain spirits and water ghosts, and hundreds of wild mountain deities. Su Fu, do you think you can defeat them? Su Fu cupped his fist, bowed slightly and said, I, Su Fu, am an expert in capturing ghosts and slaughtering deities. Baichi took a step forward and cried out in a low voice, Let me deal with those several thousand elite soldiers of Great Chu. Your Majesty, just focus on subduing the few concubines. Lowering his voice, Baichi said in a very respectful tone, We wish your Majesty can absorb the innate dark Yin element, form the Dharma body of heaven immortal, attain the righteous fruit of heaven immortal, and lead Daqin to unify the universe in the future. Ing Zheng gave a few strange laughs, then nodded his head and said, If I am lucky enough to succeed today, all of you will have contributed a lot. After I form the body of heaven immortal, and possess the Dharma power of heaven immortal, I will definitely kill that whinnying demon dragon in Longyuan River, seize his dragon soul and blood essence, and complete the first stage of 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic. I wonder if I will get some other benefits after I become a heaven immortal, and complete the first stage of 9 Dragons Cauldron Grand Magic? With an unconcealable joy, the shadows of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent suddenly flew out from behind Ing Zheng's back, emanating an enormous pressure of flood dragons that swept across the surroundings. In an instant, the wind and clouds within 1,000 miles in circumference changed color. Water vapor rose from the surrounding mountain ridges, and raindrops the size of fists came pouring down from the sky. Ing Zheng gave a long and sonorous cry. With the imperial seal hovering above his head, and the sword of Qin Emperor in his hand, Ing Zheng rode the chariot pulled by dragon horses. Accompanied by Yu Yao and accompanied by tens of thousands of thunderbolts, the chariot flew whistling all the way towards the hot spring. Ing Zheng cried out with a stern voice, Wonderful! Wonderful! I never thought that I could meet such a beauty who can topple a nation in this wilderness. I am the Emperor of Daqin, and the few of you better obey me obediently. Li Yuan, instead of letting that old fool Huang Xie take advantage of you, why don't you offer all your energy essence to me? I'll consider it as a great merit for you. The chariot flew quickly above the hot spring. Without hesitation, Ing Zheng consumed a great amount of his energy essence, along with 100 years of his lifespan, and paid a great price, completely unleashing the enormous power of the imperial seal. A mighty aura of the human emperor, combined with the unique flood dragon force of the 9 dragons cauldron grand magic, came crashing down, instantly pushing the 17 hot springs several hundred feet deep into the ground. Ing Zheng threw his head back and gave a wild laugh complacently into the sky. His eyes ran across the grassland next to the lake, and then the wisteria flowers on the cliff. For some unknown reason, the beautiful painting formed by these wildflowers, weeds, wisteria, and wisteria flowers made Ing Zheng's heart surge with an indescribable brutality. He wanted to destroy, he wanted to vent his anger, he wanted to destroy something. When the brutal energy fused with the evil flame in his lower abdomen, Ing Zheng gave a deep, deep roar and tore his long robe. The imperial seal emanated a vast and boundless pressure, firmly suppressing Yu Ji and Yu Tan. Both of them raised their heads in shock, looking at Ing Zheng and crying out in alarm. A pure and magical aura sprayed out from Yu Ji's body, transforming into a jade-colored axe that one could see with naked eyes and thrust into the sky. However, right when the axe was thrust out, it was immediately shattered into pieces by the frightening pressure emanating from the imperial seal. Yu Yao let out a long and sonorous cry. Holding the jade flute in her hand, she sprung up into the sky, leaving behind countless afterimages as she lightly pointed her finger out. A melodious phoenix cry resounded through the void. Upon hearing it, both Yu Ji and Yu Tan's bodies turned stiff, and a misty look emerged in their eyes at the same time. But in this very moment, Ing Zheng had already leaped down and unleashed a heavy punch that contained the tremendous strength of 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent, smashing viciously onto the fair and flawless bodies of the 2 girls. Several dozens of heavy punches landed, causing both Yu Ji and Chi-Chi to cough up blood and fall to the ground. Yu Yao, how dare you tell our weak point to an outsider? Yu Ji roared furiously. Yu Yao smiled faintly and said, You can't blame me for this. We have been together for over 2,000 years, and I've learned all the weaknesses of the cultivation technique practiced by both of you. It's a pity that both of you have not attained mastery in your cultivation technique, or else, these weaknesses would not be considered as weak points. In the future, both of you will have to serve the same husband together, and you still have a long way to go. Yu Yao giggled, then waved the jade flute in her hand, and easily knocked several dozens of serving ladies of Yu Ji and Yu Tan to the ground. Then she said softly, When His Majesty and both of you are married, His Majesty and both of you will not be an outsider anymore. Boom. A loud boom rang out, as 30,000 mountain spirits and water ghosts soared up into the sky from the lake several thousand feet away. Howling furiously, they came charging towards the lake. However, countless primordial runes came pouring down from the sky, forming into a thick layer of restrictive runes above the lake. When those mountain spirits and water ghosts touched these runes that contained an enormous divine power, they were immediately scorched and ripped into pieces by the thunderbolts. Together with several tens of thousands of practitioners, Su Fu hovered above the lake, sneered and said, You evil creatures, I've killed countless of you over the years, and yet you still dare to act presumptuously before me? On the grassland next to the lake, Qi Bin and Lu Mei, who were sitting behind a curtain, drinking tea and enjoying the beautiful scenery, sprung up together and cried out in alarm. Qin army! Somebody! Defend the enemies! Countless sword beams came pouring down from above, as one lofty mountain after another came crashing down from above. Bringing a large group of cultivators, Li Si swooped down from the sky. He kept uttering one Dharma word after another, which transformed into a barrage of attacks that blotted out the sky and blotted out the earth, forcing Qi Bin and Lu Mei to defend themselves. Li Si smiled faintly and said, Are both of you the imperial concubines of the Emperor of Great Chu? He, when His Majesty is done with the 2 imperial concubines, he will naturally come over and caress both of you. Please do not be impatient. Dharma word. Intimidate all ghosts and slay all evil. Li Si waved his hand casually. Countless golden beams shot out from the scroll before him, smashing onto those mountain spirits and deities who were patrolling around the curtain, and making them howl miserably. The golden beams charred their spirit bodies, causing them to emit large clouds of white smoke. When the several thousand elite soldiers of Great Chu stationed in a valley in the distance heard the commotion, they sprung up together, and were about to rush to the rescue. But suddenly, the silhouette of a white tiger flashed across the sky. It was Baichi, leading several hundred generals and over 100,000 elite soldiers of Qin army, charging down from the sky. Battle cries towered into the sky, as the armies of both dynasties were engaged in a fierce battle. In the hot spring, Yingzheng had long stripped himself naked. He grabbed Yutan and impatiently plunged into her body. The throne of heaven immortal, here I come. Yingzheng threw his head back and laughed heartily. Behind him, 8 flood dragons and 1 serpent let out long and excited cries. 3,000 miles away, on top of a lofty mountain peak, Yan Dan and Chu Ping, together with countless military officers and ministers of both dynasties, were spying on what was happening next to the hot spring through a mystic technique. Jing Ke crossed his arms before his chest, shook his head and said with mixed emotions, bringing an army of several 100,000 soldiers to rape a woman. Yingzheng has never done this before, and will never be able to do it again. It is truly a deed that will shake the heaven and earth. A glorious deed that will dazzle the world. From now on, the mighty name of Daqin will spread far and wide. While laughing coldly, Yu Ji, Yutan, Qi Bin, and Lu Mei walked out from behind Chu Ping. Their faces were unsightly as they stared at the images in the water mirror, stamping their feet angrily. Chapter 254. Wuxia did not say a word. He just cooperated with Waning Dragon King, and slowly weakened the magnetic force on Zhang Yi's body. Yan Dan had told them that if they bumped into any important ministers of Daqin like Zhang Yi, Li Si, or Su Fu, it would be best if they could capture them alive. No one would complain about having too many talented people. The 2 Earth Immortals standing next to Qin Mi Hu twitched their lips. Cautiously, they gave the several thousand aquatic demons in the surroundings a glance, then bowed their heads obediently. Waning Dragon King had a cultivation base that was close to that of a heaven immortal. But when he was wrapped by the golden flame, his scales were shattered, and large pieces of his skin and flesh were burned into ashes. Waning Dragon King kept howling in pain. Talismans made by heaven immortals. Talismans made especially for subduing demons. Boys, retreat. We cannot defend against the force of a heaven immortal. Lord Xiansheng, the 3 great demons and several thousand aquatic demons soared into the sky, leaping towards the cultivators brought here by Zhang Yi like a pack of hungry wolves. For demons, nascent souls and Jin Dan were great tonics that they could devour directly. While human cultivators had to consider the problem of impure energies, demons could not care less. They could even devour cultivators alive, let alone devouring nascent souls and Jin Dan. The gigantic beast soul of the dark nether python shot up into the sky. Controlling his beast soul, Qin Qingshui swallowed the nascent soul. A miserable howl rang out as the nascent soul was quickly digested by the poisonous aura in the dark nether python's body. Suddenly, a large sheet of green poisonous gas sprayed out from Qin Qingshui's body. His soul of dark nether python suddenly grew to 1,000 feet long, and its ferocious aura increased by at least 10 times. The soul of the dark nether python was so condensed that it looked like a real body, and vaguely, it looked no different from the original corporeal body of the dark nether python. Tens of Zhang Yi's clones condensed from magnetic power, rushed to the white flood raised by those water-kind spirit creatures. All of a sudden, a dazzling black light burst out from those clones. Countless thin black thunderbolts roared out. The power of each clone was equivalent to a full-force strike of an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. Hundreds of water-kind spirit creatures vomited blood and stepped back. All weapons and armors worn by these water-kind spirit creatures, as long as they were made of metal, were taken away by the strong magnetic force, transformed into cold beams of light, and darted up. Zhang Yi held the arrow and howled. His body suddenly turned into a patch of black light, sweeping up the Yuanying cultivators and fleeing. Qin Nihu threw his head back and shouted, "Bastard! I lost an arm, I want one too. Even if I keep it with me and use it when I break through to the nascent soul realm in the future, I still want one. Wuxia, you bastard, you really chopped off one of my hands. It's just acting. Do you have to be so ruthless?" The golden flame burst out from the bodies of Wanying Dragon King and the other aquatic demons. In just a blink of an eye, their skins were ripped and their muscles were torn, and a burning smell was emitted from their bodies. The magnetic force around Zhang Yi's body was dimming, and he was about to be captured alive by Wu Qi and the others. All of a sudden, a 10 miles long golden talisman appeared in the air. A vast and mighty immortal energy burst out from the talisman, and a row of large characters. 8 elements demon subduing talisman created by the 9 spirits heaven could be seen clearly on the surface of the golden talisman. Wanying Dragon King was dazzled by the sudden attack of Zhang Yi, and it took him a while to locate Zhang Yi's true form. All of a sudden, the black dragon soul inside the black dragon spirit ring revealed its true form. It opened its mouth and swallowed the 2 nascent souls captured by Wu Qi. Then it let out a satisfied dragon cry and hid back into the ring, slowly digesting the nascent souls and replenishing its energy. Wu Qi cursed angrily, then hastily chased after the few nascent souls who had fled to a distance of about 1 mile. Hastily, Wu Qi stretched his hand into the air and pulled over 2,000 demon cores into his palm. After that, he asked with a stern voice, "Who is the Almighty who dares to make things difficult for Great Yen?" Wu Qi took out a thick stack of high-level spirit talismans and smashed them towards Zhang Yi's face. The sky was filled with thunderbolts, fireballs, and golden ice blades. "You bastard! You say I'm a ruthless person? Do you think I'm a merciful person? Look at the sword on my belly. My spine was almost cut off by you guys. Damn it, Qin Nihu. Don't let Lao Tzu bump into those 2 sinecures of Qin clan and Ming Mountains." The hammer was thrust out. Zhang Yi moved his body and dodged the attack, but a nascent soul cultivator who followed behind him had his body smashed by Wanying Dragon King's hammer. The nascent soul cultivator let out a miserable howl as his fleshly body exploded into a mist of blood in an instant. His nascent soul flew out at top speed, leaving a trail of blood behind as it tried to hide into Zhang Yi's magnetic force. A cold laugh was heard coming from afar, followed by a jarring wind-breaking noise. An arrow was seen flying over from the sky, falling right into the hand of Zhang Yi, who was still in a panicked state. The voice sneered and said, "Great Yen has set up a dragon-slaying plan to kill the Emperor of Daqin, Yingzheng. This is the formation laid out by Great Yen and Great Chu. By following the formation, Yingzheng has a 30% chance of escaping. Hurry up and save him. Don't delay." A spirit talisman created by a heaven immortal? Lord Xiansheng and the other aquatic demons were cursing aloud as they plunged into the river with their bodies shrouded in raging flames. Although they had fled quickly, among the several thousand aquatic demons present, nearly half of them were burned into ashes. Over 2,000 demon cores, each the size of a water tank, were wheeling chaotically in the air, and were about to be burned into ashes by the golden immortal energy. Wu Qi thrust out the sword of Greedy Wolf, and left a deep wound on Zhang Yi's body. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi said, "Old Mr. Gigazi has the most marvelous technique of yin and yang divination under the heaven. But over at Great Chu's side, His Majesty Chu Ping is leading 36,000 ghosts and deities to lay out the shrouding sky formation, which has covered the entire heavenly secrets within 10 million miles of Meng Mountains, disrupting the circulation of stars and energies in the underground energy veins. Unless one has the cultivation base of heaven immortal, no one can find out anything." In the blink of an eye, the dark beam broke through the interception of the white water and shot several miles up into the sky. While Zhang Yi was about to exercise his divine ability and flee, Wanying Dragon King had already teleported in front of Zhang Yi while laughing loudly. 2 large hammers were smashing viciously towards Zhang Yi's escape beam. Wanying Dragon King cried out sternly, "Little fellow, you still want to escape from my hands? No matter how strong your Tao, magic, and divine ability is, you have to stay here obediently. A strong black light flickered in the air. While foaming at the mouth, Wanying Dragon King had exerted all his strength and forcefully smashed both golden hammers onto the protective magnetic force around Zhang Yi. Buzzing noises of explosion kept ringing out. Zhang Yi had exercised the magnetic grand magic, connecting the surrounding underground energy veins and natural energies into one with the magnetic force. When Wanying Dragon King's hammer smashed down, it was as if he was smashing the heaven and earth several hundred miles in circumference at the same time, causing the surrounding void to tremble violently. Zhang Yi roared furiously. The shrouding sky formation created by those barbarian ghosts and deities? If I can escape from here today, I'll definitely lead an army and invade Great Chu in the future, killing all those barbarian ghosts and deities. Zhang Yi, don't you dare run away. Leave the formation map behind. Wuxia cried out sternly. Then he too stepped onto a sword beam and chased after Zhang Yi. Zhang Yi was so anxious that his face turned purple. He threw his head back and cried out at the top of his voice. I, Zhang Yi, have been a wise man all my life, but I'm going to die here today. Oh, my master, your yin and yang divination technique is extremely magical, but why didn't you predict today's dangerous situation? Usually, even if there were any natural or man-made disasters happening in Qin Kingdom, Master would be able to sense it a few years in advance. But why didn't I see any sign today? Zhang Yi's cultivation base was just a tiny bit away from forming his nascent divinity, while Wanying Dragon King was just one step away from transcending his thunder tribulation and becoming a heaven immortal. The gap between their cultivation base was too huge. Even though Zhang Yi had seized all the natural energies within several hundred miles in circumference, he still could not withstand the tremendous force of Wanying Dragon King, which came like a thunderbolt, pressing down like Mount Tai. Wuxia had a very close relationship with the aquatic demons from Longyuan River, and they dared not to bump into Wuxia in the depth of Meng Mountains in the future. This young man was a cruel and merciless man. Perhaps he would really kill them, seize their nascent souls and concoct pills, or consume them directly. The nascent souls of Earth immortals were the purest essence of energy. As long as one's corporeal body could withstand the impact of the energy, possess a sufficient understanding of the heavenly Tao, and possess a sufficient cultivation base, consuming one nascent soul could almost allow an ordinary mortal to form his nascent soul. The magnetic escape beam was destroyed. Without hesitation, Wuxia stretched out his hands and grabbed at those nascent souls that were flying away in all directions. Without a corporeal body, even a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator could not bring out the overall strength that a Jindan cultivator could exert. Wuqi's great hand of web swept across the sky with shrill whistling noises. The acquired energies of 5 elements turned into 5 colored torrents, sucking one nascent soul after another into Wuqi's palm. After that, he imprisoned them and threw them into the Black Dragon Spirit Ring. When Wuxia saw the benefits, he raised up a large sheet of water to cover his body, then sped up into the sky and grabbed towards the nascent soul of the Earth Immortal. The great hand of web thrust out whistling along with the acquired energies of 5 elements, forming an air vortex that measured 1,000 feet in diameter on Wuqi's palm. A tremendous suction force coiled around the nascent soul, reducing its flying speed at an incredible rate. Wuxia flew into a rage. He glared at Qin Qingshui and roared, "Among these nascent souls, I want at least 3 of them. Otherwise, I'll never let you go." Crack! The protective magnetic force around Zhang Yi's body was destroyed by Wanying Dragon King with a violent force. The golden hammer brushed past Zhang Yi's body at a slanted angle, causing half of his shoulder to collapse and nearly shatter his body. Zhang Yi let out a miserable howl. Suddenly, his body swayed, and the magnetic force quickly gathered in his body. Layers of illusions soared into the sky. Using the magnetic force, Zhang Yi formed several hundred illusions of himself, shooting them out in all directions while cursing furiously. In just a blink of an eye, all of Zhang Yi's subordinates were killed. Only 7 Earth Immortals, the strongest among them, were still fighting with all their might. However, when faced with the joint attack from Lord Xianxing and the 3 great demons, as well as the countless water and yin thunders that blotted the sky, the 7 Earth Immortals were coughing out blood. It seemed that they would not be able to hold on for much longer. Quickly, together with the remaining cultivators around them, they chased after the arrows in a flustered and exasperated manner. The void talisman had vanished soundlessly, and the mountain ridge in the distance was completely empty. Not even a shadow of a ghost could be seen. The formation of the aquatic demons was thrown into chaos. Zhang Yi waved his sleeve and rolled up his subordinates, as well as the nascent souls who had escaped after their bodies were destroyed. Then, he transformed into a dark beam and sped up into the sky. Zhang Yi had given up the thought of chasing after Wuxia, retrieving the black dragon spirit ring, and seizing those innate and acquired treasures. Since Wuxia and his company were a trap, could it be that Zhang, who had gone to find Yu Ji and Li Yueyan because of the words spoken by Wuxia and Qin Qingshui, was also a trap? At the thought of the blow Daqin would suffer if something were to happen to Zhang, Zhang Yi was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. Qin Nihu and Qin Qingshui exchanged a glance. Suddenly, they jumped to their feet in exasperation and cried out. Who leaked the military secret? Capture that man and chop him into 1,000 pieces. Wanying Dragon King kept smashing Zhang Yi with his heavy hammer as if he was swatting a fly. The attacks disintegrated Zhang Yi's escape beam, while Zhang Yi himself was coughing out a mouthful of blood. The difference between a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator and a peak-stage nascent divinity cultivator was like the difference between a peak-stage Jindan cultivator and an ordinary infant. If not for Zhang Yi's magical magnetic grand magic, which allowed him to absorb the natural forces for his own use and replenish his energy, he would have been beaten to death by Wanying Dragon King. Qin Qingshui burped contentedly, laughed out loud and said, I'm not going to argue with you. My patriarch has used 3 inner cores of strange beasts to stimulate my beast soul, allowing me to break through to nascent soul realm. I can no longer generate beast soul for the next 3 years, or else, I'll most likely turn into another python. Hee, how many nascent souls can you grab today? Ugh, most of them will be yours. Chapter 255. Riding on a dark beam, Zhang Yi fled at top speed, while Wuqia rode on the sword of Greedy Wolf, transforming into a dark shadow and following closely behind. As he was severely wounded by Wanying Dragon King, Zhang Yi's speed was getting slower and slower, and Wuqia was about to catch up with him. Amidst the dark beam, Zhang Yi gave a furious cry. Abruptly, the dark beam split into 7 tiny dark beams, escorting his 7 nascent soul subordinates as they shot forward. Suddenly, the magnetic force surrounding Zhang Yi retracted, and with a blink of his body, he came before Wuqia and blocked his path. A dark gleam flickered in Zhang Yi's eyes as he stared at Wuqia, sneered and said, Wuqia, do you really think you can defeat me? Wuqia retracted his sword beam, stared at Zhang Yi fearlessly, smiled and said, How would I know if I don't try? I possess acquired spirit pearls of 5 elements, and I'm cultivating an acquired cultivation technique of 5 elements. However, apart from the Unity of Sword Energies script of Heaven-Breaking Sword Sect, I don't have any other divine abilities or cultivation techniques. I'm sorry for my energy. Therefore, I just want to obtain the incantation of the magnetic grand magic from you, old mister. Zhang Yi stared at Wuqia with astonishment. After a long while he threw his head back, let out a long laugh and said, So, the reason why you're chasing after me is to seize the divine abilities and mystic techniques from me? I thought you're trying to stop me from losing the blueprint of the dragon-slaying formation. Wuqia shook his head and said, I don't care whether the blueprint is lost or not. Great Yen and Great Chu have joined hands and laid out a massive ambush to kill Zhang. If he still managed to escape, it would mean that Zhang is not fated to die yet. I'm just a small potato, and I don't care about the affairs of the state. Giving Zhang Yi a strange smile, Wuqia took a deep breath, smiled and said, What I care about is my own cultivation base, my own divine abilities and dermic powers. On top of that, I have a supreme treasure transformed from innate earth element energy essence. If I can cultivate the magnetic grand magic, my future achievement will definitely be at least 100 times stronger than old mister. Zhang Yi's face twitched in anger. He cursed in a low voice. Brat, you're being rude. Do you think I'm a dead dog that you can cook as you please? For the innate earth element energy essence to fall into your hands is like casting pearls before swine. Damn it, damn it. All these years, I, Dachin, have collected over 30 types of innate spirit objects, and most of them are of the element of gold and wood. This is the first time I've seen this innate earth element energy essence. Staring hard at Wuxia, Zhang Yi rolled up his sleeves with some malice. While rolling up his sleeves, he sneered and said, "Fine, fine. I'll be shameless and take away your innate earth element energy essence today. And those 5 acquired spiritual pearls, I can take them back and bestow them to my descendants. They are also precious treasures. Although our Dachin is rich and populous, if we split it evenly, each noble clan won't even get a single acquired spirit pearl." Countless magnetic forces shot out, turning into black flying swords that shot toward Wuxia. Zhang Yi roared with laughter and said, "And the black dragon spirit ring. This is the imperial decree given to me by His Majesty. If you had retreated into the water with that old dragon, I would not be able to do anything to you. But little did I expect that you would come to me on your own accord. Now, I can only bully a junior like you." The flying swords formed from magnetic force were extremely sharp and heavy, and they flew at an incredible speed as well. These magnetic flying swords had the same effect as the golden dragon scales on Wuqia's earth element dragon scale shield, but they were different methods that led to the same result. In just a blink of an eye, the flying swords, which were formed from several tens of thousands of magnetic forces, had arrived next to Wuxia, thrusting towards him from top to bottom, as if they were going to grind him into minced meat on the spot. Wuxia casually raised his left hand and activated the earth element dragon scale shield. A clump of dense yellow mist wrapped around his body, while several tens of thousands of golden beams in the shape of dragon scales wheeled rapidly around him, clashing and colliding with the countless palm-sized magnetic flying swords. Deep, muffled booms of explosions kept ringing out. As the magnetic flying swords did not have real bodies, they shattered into pieces after colliding with the golden dragon scales. The glow of the golden dragon scales dimmed a little, but under the control of Wuqia's will, it quickly flew back into the earth element dragon scale shield, quickly replenishing its innate earth element energy essence, and shot out again with a dazzling gleam. Sensing the tremendous impact coming from the magnetic flying swords, as well as the aura of sharpness that was a few times sharper than the golden dragon scales, Wuxia nodded his head and praised, "Wonderful. If I can cultivate the magnetic grand magic and use it to drive the earth element dragon scale shield, its power will be at least 100 times stronger. Old Mr. Zhang Yi, please give in to me." Laughing loudly, Wuxia waved his hand. A ring of dense yellow light rushed out from the shield, quickly devouring all the magnetic flying swords that came piercing at him from all directions. The innate earth element energy essence was the source of all the earth element energies under the heaven. The magnetic force was also a type of earth element energy. By controlling the innate earth element energy essence and devouring the magnetic flying swords, Wuxia converted the magnetic force into nutrients for the earth element dragon scale shield, just like how humans ate and drank. The rolling yellow mist around him grew denser and denser, while the magnetic force released by him kept weakening. Zhang Yi stared at Wuxia with anger and shock. Suddenly he sneered and said, "Fine, fine. Since you want to seize my magnetic grand magic, I'm going to seize all your treasures as well. Today this old man will go all out and compete with you, a junior, for a while. You have the innate earth element energy essence to protect you, although you only have the cultivation base of early stage Jin Dan realm. Don't blame me for bullying you." Then, he waved both hands, causing the natural energies in the underground energy veins and all the natural energies within 1,000 miles to ripple and gather towards him. It was as if his body had turned into a huge black hole, quickly devouring all kinds of natural energies. A black light ball, about 1 mile in diameter and formed by the magnetic force, enveloped Zhang Yi and Wuqia, then quickly drilled into the ground. Like a drop of water fusing into the ocean, the magnetic force quickly fused into the ground. Before long, it had traveled several thousand miles away along with the underground energy veins. Wuqia hovered quietly in the black ball of light, looking at Zhang Yi with a smile on his face, and letting Zhang Yi use his divine ability to take him away. Zhang Yi fished out a medicine bottle, and swallowed a few healing spirit pills. While circulating his energy and regulating his breath, he smiled faintly at Wuxia and said, "In order to lure His Majesty into your trap, you've really made up your mind. Those subordinates you killed in the battle are all men of sacrifice, aren't they? It's fine if you lost some men of sacrifice, but in order to make us believe that you're really fighting among yourselves, you've actually wounded yourselves. You've really made up your mind." Wuxia nodded with a smile and said, "If I can't be ruthless to myself, how can I deceive you?" Touching the wound on his belly that was cut by the sword beam, Wuxia sighed and said, "If not for the fact that the Emperor of Great Chu, Chu Ping, had given me the bamboo paste, a spirit medicine that can heal all wounds in an instant, Wuxia would never agree to their damned plan of luring the enemy. My spine was nearly broken by the flying sword. It's very painful, very painful." Smiling, Zhang Yi looked at Wuxia, nodded and said, "Apart from this paste, are there any other benefits?" Wuxia nodded and said, "Of course there are. His Majesty has promised me that if I can successfully luring Zheng into the ambush, he will confer me the title of Duke of Purple Jade Seal, the highest rank among all the Dukes of Great Yan. Qin Qingshui and all the others can also be conferred the title of Marquis. After all, this is a mission with the risk of being beheaded." Breathing out a deep sigh, Wuxia said, "Men die for wealth, and birds die for food. Apart from the reward from His Majesty Chu Ping has also promised me that as long as we can luring Zheng into the ambush, regardless of the outcome, he will reward me, Qin Mihu, and Qin Qingshui with a precious treasure." Rubbing his palms happily, Wuxia smiled and said, "The precious treasure mentioned by the Emperor of Great Chu should not be too shabby, right?" Zhang Yi's expression flickered. He pointed his finger out, and the black ball of light abruptly emerged from the ground, bringing both men with it. It was a swamp amidst a group of mountains, about 100 miles in circumference. The sky was filled with miasma, and stinking poisonous gases were drifting in all directions. Countless venomous bugs were swimming in the swamp, and there were some withered trees and grasses growing sparsely in the swamp. They looked strangely shaped, and obviously, they were not some kind creatures. Zhang Yi glanced around and smiled satisfyingly. He turned to look at Wuxia and said, "Duke of Purple Jade Seal, a first-grade Duke of Great Yan? And the precious treasure promised by Chu Ping? But have you ever thought that if you were to be captured alive by me, or even killed by me, how would you be able to enjoy that illustrious title and precious treasure? You've come to pursue this old man to seize this old man's magnetic grand magic." He raised his hand, and a black-yellow seal shot up into the sky from the top of Zhang Yi's head. Immediately, the surrounding mountains and rivers trembled violently. Zhang Yi pointed at the seal and said with a smile, "This is the seal of 1,000 mountains. It can suppress underground energy veins, and draw the forces of mountains and rivers within 10,000 miles for my use." With a wave of his hand, a dazzling golden bell in the shape of a bell appeared in Zhang Yi's hand. He looked at Wuxia, smiled and said, "The name of this treasure is the mountain-moving bell. It can control the earth and mountains and rivers to move according to my will. If my cultivation base reaches the realm of heaven immortal, I can even turn the mountains and rivers into divine beings, controlling them to fight against the enemies." Staring at Wuxia, Zhang Yi let out a long laugh and said, Wuxia, even though you are protected by the innate earth element energy essence, your cultivation base is far weaker than mine. On top of that, I have an extraordinary ancient treasure with me. What can you do to me?" Zhang Yi snorted deeply, then snapped, "Hand over all your treasures and submit to me, Daqin. And I can still guarantee you a bright future. Daqin is destined to sweep across the world and unify the world. You have no future in Great Yan." Wuxia chuckled and waved his left hand. A large sheet of white light burst out from the spirit breeding ring, from which came 100 long bow men with silvery hair, bodies as fair as jade, and eyes that flickered with a silvery gleam that looked like a raging flame. They roared thunderously and dashed out from the white light. When Wuxia bought them, these longbow men were only 100 feet tall. But after consuming the ancestral awakening and body-tempering soup and forming the Jin Dan, in just a few months, these longbow men had grown to a height of 1,000 feet. Especially the first Long Yuan who formed the Jin Dan, his height had reached 1,500 feet. These huge long bowmen only had a large piece of hide wrapped around their crotch area, exposing the rest of their bodies. There were complicated golden runic patterns on their faces, extending all the way down to their arms. On their necks, the golden runes seemed to be extending toward their bodies. A few of them had branched out from the main runes, vaguely enveloping half of their bodies. Relying on their innately strong fleshly bodies, the amount of energy stored in their bodies was thousands of times greater than that of ordinary human cultivators. And their innately strong souls, longbow men could always fight with human cultivators who were one realm higher. Longbow men of Jin Dan realm could fight with human cultivators of nascent soul realm. Longbow men of nascent soul realm could fight with human cultivators of nascent divinity realm. And longbow men who had formed their nascent divinity realm could fight with lower-grade heaven immortals. This was a race with incredible innate talent. Right when the 100 longbow men who formed the Jin Dan rushed out, Zhang Yi gave a strange cry with fear, spun and fled without saying a word. But no matter how fast Zhang Yi fled, these huge longbow men were even faster. As soon as they jumped out of the white light, they instantly teleported into the air, where they set up a mighty and mysterious grand formation. The Heavenly 100 Spirit Warring Formation. Teleportation. Right after these long bowmen formed the Jin Dan, they had mastered the divine ability of teleportation, which only nascent divinity cultivators could use. At this moment, their innate divine ability and innate strength were completely revealed. Zhang Yi, who had transformed into a dark beam and fled, did not expect that these giants could actually teleport when they were still in the Jin Dan realm. Therefore, he decided to send himself to the Heavenly 100 Spirit Warring Formation. Wuxia gave 3 loud laughs, then stuck out his chest and cried out, "Capture them alive! Just don't kill them!" A thunderclap echoed out, and the formation was immediately activated. Countless thunderbolts and flames that looked like flood dragons burst out from the huge bodies of these longbow men. Behind these giants, strange signs of Jin Dan emerged one after another. All of them looked exactly like these longbow men, except that they were about 10,000 feet tall. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.